No, you are not at the Sleeman Center getting ready for a Guelph Storm game, although it is this song that the Storm use as their entrance song onto the ice at the Sleeman Center. And if I may also add, they crank it up to not 11, maybe not even 12, but 13 or 14 in there. Holy Hannah. When you go next year for the Memorial Cup, take an extra set of earplugs. It gets loud in there. Or maybe I'm just a little bit old. If it's too loud, you're too old. I heard that many times, possibly even said it when I was a younger man, and look at me now. It is loud in the Sleeman Center when they fire up that song to start a Storm game. That song, of course, is Thunderstruck by AC/DC. Peaked at number 4 on the singles charts in Australia, but it went number 1 in Finland and reached number 5 in the U.S. on Billboard's Album Rock Tracks chart. And in 2010, it topped Triple ML Melbourne's Ultimate 500 Rock Countdown in Australia. That's just a little bit of background trivia on the song itself. One of the best-selling singles of all time with over 15 million units sold. And the reason we play it today is because Jocelyn asked us to. It is really that simple. It is a special anniversary for Jocelyn today. And so to mark that 4-year occasion, she said, I would love to hear a little bit of Thunderstruck. Help me mark that anniversary in appropriate fashion. I said, Jocelyn, we will absolutely do that for you. It's not an all-request Tuesday. I'm sorry for that. I know you like the all-request things. And little did I know, the Pandora's box I was opening yesterday when I told you that the theme for this week's All Request Friday, because we always do your requests on Friday, play a little bit of the song that you want to hear, and we attach a theme to it. And I thought to myself, well, there's all this talk about dry January. There was even a story in the news yesterday morning about dry January, and in fact, how much Canadians are drinking, more than pre-pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, let's just take those of us who are trying to do some sort of dry January and have a drink together figuratively on the show and make our theme this Friday for All Request Friday drinking songs, booze, alcohol, songs about drinking. And I think we have already reached our limit and gone beyond the number of songs we can possibly play on Friday. Just like sometimes we reach our limit and then go beyond what we're supposed to drink. And when that happens, we have this thing called a hangover, which is what we're going to do with all of the extra song requests we have for this Friday. We're going to have the hangover request show next Monday. So if you have not yet submitted your request for this Friday, songs about drinking, alcohol, whatever, maybe it's just your favorite drinking song. Make it fit the theme. Let us know what your request is, and it'll either appear on Friday during the show or pop up on Monday with our hangover edition. It is a Tuesday morning, the 13th of January, and, you know, it's a very good day if you are a sports fan like me, because the Toronto Maple Leafs took a 9-game point streak, no losses in regulation for the Toronto Maple Leafs going into last night's game in Colorado. And everybody said, well, now this is it, right? This is the end of the line. Colorado's the best team in the NHL. They have not lost a game at home all year, the Colorado Avalanche. And the Toronto Maple Leafs were playing in Colorado's arena where they have not lost a game all year. In this part of the world, the game started at 10 p.m. So I could only hang in for one period, after which the Leafs were trailing by a score of 2-1. But you know what happens when the Leafs play, right? Even if they're playing in a place where no team has won before this season. That's right, Austin Matthews, initials AM, with a little AM on AM.
Here the Leafs in on the left wing, trying to get a shot away. They score! Austin Matthews doesn't hit iron this time. He snaps it in behind Minor. The Leafs have a 3-2 lead.
And that's your AM, Austin Matthews, on AM radio in the AM part of the day. We call it AM on AM in the AM. And the Leafs would go on to win the game in overtime, 4-3. As I said, first time Colorado has lost a game on home ice all season. And wouldn't you know it, Leafs fans, the Toronto Maple Leafs wake up this morning in a playoff spot. It's a wild card playoff spot, but it's a 10-game run, 8 wins, no regulation losses, 2 overtime losses in their past 10 games. The Leafs are in a playoff spot as of this morning. I'm not going to go any further than that. I am simply sharing with you the facts as they exist today. The Leafs win last night. I've also been getting a lot of messages this morning. I'm a little bit confused by them. Something about my favorite NFL football team. I've been clear about this, okay? They are still my favorite NFL football team. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the black and gold, the good old steel curtain defense. I remain a fan, but I stopped investing time, energy, passion into the team this year when I felt the team had given up on me by hiring this goofy quarterback who's not only is he not a good quarterback, he's not a good person. I don't know how much longer we need to go through this routine with this quarterback that the Pittsburgh Steelers hired this year. But my friends Charlie and Jason, who called the show yesterday and were pumping the tires and saying, come on, Mikey, get back on that bandwagon. There's plenty of room for you. I don't know what happened last night, but I know a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback when I see one, okay?
A lot of doubt about whether or not he'd be able to play, too, after that concussion he suffered against Oakland. Here's Bradshaw. Bothered from behind. Lynn Swann is open. Got it. Steeler touchdown. Mark Washington with him. The Cowboys had the safety blitz on. 64-yard touchdown pass from Bradshaw to Lynn Swann, and Bradshaw is down.
Bradshaw is down, but he threw the ball about 65 yards, and he threw it a ton. Now he's on his feet. He's got a long time to rest up. That's got to be one of the great passes in Super Bowl history or in pro football history.
In fact, that's what it is described as, the greatest pass in football history, according to the NFL itself. Terry Bradshaw to Lynn Swann in the Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys. 64-yard touchdown pass. There is one and only one TB12, a quarterback. Terry Bradshaw wore number 12 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tough as nails, could throw the ball. That's my kind of Pittsburgh Steelers. That's when I fell in love with the team. That's why I still love them today. And I don't know about the guy who was playing quarterback last night. Did he fumble the ball at a critical time in the game and allow the other team to score? Did he throw an interception at a critical time of the game and allow the other team to score? Don't know. Don't care. I'm sorry for those of you who are still so passionate about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think we got what we deserved this year with that goofy quarterback. And that's enough of that. Moving on to more serious issues. Something struck me with the city of Kitchener's decision to approve housing developments despite the water capacity issue that's been identified here in the region of Waterloo. And what I'm wondering about, I understand that the city of Kitchener first deferred these applications for development and now is going to allow them through the use of a holding provision. Just by way of background here, a holding provision is a legal mechanism within the Planning Act here in Ontario that allows a local government to let development proceed, like Kitchener is, but place a temporary restriction on that development until specific conditions are met. And these conditions are set by the municipality. So it's not rushing into anything. And in a quote from Kitchener Mayor Barry Verbanovic, we have a housing supply crisis, and it's vital that we ensure planning and development decisions are made at the local level where and when servicing capacity permits. Council's decision to approve these two housing projects with a holding provision is a thoughtful, responsible, and risk-based approach to achieving this goal. Fair enough. Again, the holding provision in here is critical from where I'm sitting, but I can't help but wonder, and I have no insider information on this, so I am strictly speculating. I want you to know that. But I cannot help but wonder if this isn't just a wee bit, maybe a wee bit of shade being thrown from one level of local government to another level of local government. Do you think that's possible? The region done gummed up the water situation, right? There's no question about that. And as Josh Piercy was reporting during All News Mornings today, the region's going to be getting an earful about that at its meeting. But it's a big mess, and it's a mess of the region's own making. So by still approving these housing developments, is Kitchener just kind of winking and thumbing its nose in the region's direction to say, listen, we got to move forward. There's a housing supply crisis going on. You figure out your own stuff over there, but we cannot stop approving housing, despite the fact that you went and messed up the water situation. That's just, again, where my mind went when I heard this decision from Kitchener Council last night, because the other part of this, to me, is you can approve all the permits you want, all the planning applications you want, and this is well and good. But is anything, I shouldn't say is anything, it's very general, but how much is really being built right now? How many times have you heard the mayor of Waterloo, for example, Dorothy McCabe, talking about the number of permits that have been approved? We're talking in the thousands of housing units, but they're not being built. The market is going to determine when these towers get built on Cortlandt Avenue and when these housing projects that Kitchener approved last night will go ahead. Water or no water, not too many people are all that interested in building right now because the market just isn't as lucrative as it was several years ago. So I think Kitchener could approve these even without a holding provision, and by the time anything's getting built, one would assume the water supply has been corrected. However, the water supply issue. But in this instance, I just can't help but wonder, and maybe it's just me and my distaste for two levels of local government or just looking for something sort of behind the curtain here, but I can't help but wonder if the city of Kitchener isn't just poking a little bit at the region of Waterloo, because this is the region's water mess, and the city of Kitchener is making it clear that it's not its own water mess. It's this region of Waterloo's water mess. So, hey, business as usual in Kitchener. We're going to approve these housing developments. You get that water stuff figured out. That's my suspicion. Pure speculation on my part, but hey, they pay me to sit here and speculate.
1, 2.
How about a Farwell Show 5 for this Tuesday morning? We'll start at number 1, Wilmot making some organizational changes, adding a deputy CAO position to enhance oversight, ensure continuity, and allow increased focus on corporate priorities. Longtime employee Harold Okrafka has been appointed to the role. The decision comes as a result of advice from a consultant leading the review of how Wilmot delivers services. And it follows a consultant-led budget process that recommends a 9.7% tax increase in Wilmot. That would translate to $24 a month for the average homeowner. Wilmot Council will discuss the proposed budget at a meeting on January the 29th. Number 2, Woolwich Mayor Sandy Shance's first strong mayor's budget is calling for a 7.8% tax increase, or about $100 more for the average home in Woolwich. Survey response to help shape the budget found many Woolwich residents overwhelmed by recent tax increases and embarrassed by the state of the township's roads. This budget will add $100,000 to winter control while putting an additional $200,000 into a winter control reserve. Well, which council will discuss the budget at its meeting tonight. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Mark Carney will be flying to China later today for the first visit to the country by a Canadian Prime Minister in 8 years. He is expected to arrive tomorrow, and once there, Prime Minister Carney will focus on trade, energy, agriculture, and international security. Carney will also meet face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping as he tries to repair Ottawa and Beijing's tense relationship. Number 4, there's a global backlash against Elon Musk's chatbot. Indonesia and Malaysia blocked access to Grok on X as concerns grow that it's being misused to generate sexually explicit and non-consensual images that mostly target women, but in some cases have included children. Malaysian authorities also say they'll take legal action, accusing the company of failing to ensure the safety of users. One law expert here in Canada says governments should be paying attention to these kinds of online threats and calls it a clearly gendered issue. I read a story about this on the weekend, and can I just say, gross. Like, what? We cannot let the machines take over, okay? I mean, we're already letting the machines take over, but oh my goodness, just gross. The whole ding-dang thing. Gross. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Trees for Tots in Guelph raised more than $90,000 for the Children's Foundation of Guelph in Wellington. The annual fundraiser happened on Saturday, collecting and chipping more than 3,500 Christmas trees. The trees are chipped and then returned to nature through walking trails, creek restoration, and other community projects while raising funds for the local charity. The $90,000 raised this year is exponentially higher than the $3,600 raised during the first Trees for Tots fundraiser back in 2013. Love the idea, and it continues going strong. $90,000 for the Children's Foundation of Guelph and Wellington through the Trees for Tots campaign this year. Good job by you. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Tuesday morning.
Can I have 2 liters of pop? Can I have 2 liters of pop? Well, what's more healthy, 4 beers or 2 liters of Coca-Cola? Do the math.
The only math I can do is 5, the Farwell Show 5. And as you know, on this show, phone lines are open the minute we begin the program every day. Your morning wake-up call is coming up. Either you can make it or I will. It's the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I came across something in my morning paper that has got me reconsidering my intentions in the next several months. No, not the intentions that come with those well-meaning New Year's resolutions. No. But each and every year, as the good, upstanding citizen that I am. Look, I only use that in this context, okay? Don't get carried away. But in this context, I am, and I have the records to prove it. I've got the receipts, as the kids would say. I am a good and upstanding citizen because each and every year when tax time rolls around, I dutifully file those taxes. I don't like doing it necessarily. And a long time ago, I began the practice of not looking at the part of my paycheck where it shows me the federal tax that has been withheld. But that's neither here nor there. That's just how I conduct my financial affairs. But each and every year, when tax time rolls around, I make sure that I get my taxes filed. I get them done on time. I dot my I's. I cross my T's. But I'm wondering if maybe, just maybe, this is the year that I choose not to do that, in hopes that perhaps the federal government will just write off my unfiled taxes as bad debt. And furthermore, not tell you that they did it. I mean, who needs transparency from the government anyway? And I also say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek because I am not of the magnitude of an unfiled tax that would even register federally. But I guarantee you, if I didn't file, they'd let me know. They would track me down, and I would be sure to catch up on any payments I am in arrears. It turns out that debt write-offs by our federal government climbed above $5 billion during the last fiscal year. And here's the thing. The government continues the practice of keeping secret the identities of those who benefit from debt relief. So you don't file, you don't pay those taxes. That's what most of these bad debts written off are all about. And then the government doesn't tell us who is responsible for the bad debt. Now, the total amounts do get disclosed every year, right? Like I said, last year it tops $5 billion. By the way, the biggest year of bad debt being written off by our federal government was 2018, when $6.3 billion was written off. And it had slowly come down since then to $2.3 billion in 2021. But all of a sudden, we had a spike again last year, in the last fiscal year, to more than $5 billion debt write-offs by our federal government. Now, that has prompted a Conservative MP to introduce a private member's bill that would require our federal government to publicly disclose all corporate write-offs worth more than $1 million. The bill would also force the Canada Revenue Agency to explain why the debt was forgiven. But just explain to me why it is that the government will write off this debt, which essentially means we are making good on it, and not reveal the names of the businesses or the individuals whose debts, most of which, as I said, stem from unpaid taxes, were written off. In what world is this actually all right? I have a difficult time with that. More than $5 billion bad debt just written off. The government will tell you the aggregate number. This is how much we wrote off, but it will not tell you what is contained, the line items, if you will, within that number. I think it's wrong. And like I said, if I don't file my taxes this year, what do you think is going to happen to me? Tony is on the phone with us this morning. Hey, Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you, my friend?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
Good.
I had a friend of mine, a gentleman I worked with. He had that same sentiment you did, and he said he wasn't going to file his taxes. So he didn't for 2 years. On year number 3, he's like, you know what? This is pretty good. But one day he went to go use his debit card, and guess what? He couldn't use his debit card, couldn't use his credit card, nothing. When he went to the bank, they said you have to call Revenue Canada. So just so you know, eventually they do catch up to you.
Okay. So what you're telling me, Tony, is I should file my taxes grudgingly again this year.
Like I do every year, Mike.
All right, buddy. Thanks for the tip.
Have a good one, buddy.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. I was joking just a little bit. Of course I'll file my taxes again because Tony's not wrong. It will catch up to you. And being the good, upstanding citizen you are, you'll pay. But why is this the case? That the government will release the figures, okay, just over $5 billion in the last fiscal year, written off as bad debt. But that's all we're going to tell you. We're not going to tell you how much of that bad debt belonged to company X, Y, or Z, or perhaps multi-millionaire or billionaire X, Y, or Z. I don't know. We don't know what's contained within that. And that, my friends, is not transparency. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is called the Neighborhood Services Map. It is the creation of 1 million neighbors, WR. And its intent is to identify areas in our region where there are gaps in access to services. Sam Nabby is the project coordinator with 1 million neighbors and joins us to talk more about this new map. Sam, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks very much for making the time. Who or what are 1 Million Neighbors, WR?
Yeah, 1 Million Neighbors is a project that started in 2024, and we brought together about 65 different groups, nonprofits, community groups, neighborhood associations throughout Waterloo Region, and we met in roundtable discussions to figure out what does growth look like in a way that fulfills our mission and visions. So the nonprofit sector has traditionally not been as present in these strategic policy visioning discussions, and we wanted to make sure that voice was represented alongside the perspectives that you might see from business or from government.
So what led to the creation of this neighborhood service map?
The spark of the idea actually started at a roundtable we had in Cambridge, where one of the participants said, we really need something at a glance to understand some of these disparities in our region. I think people know intuitively that areas such as Cambridge have been underinvested in compared to Kitchener and Waterloo, and access to social services in those areas can be hard to come by sometimes. We had stories about youth requiring mental health services who were in Cambridge having to travel to North Waterloo for specialized care, which just because something exists in the region doesn't mean that it is accessible to everyone in the region.
What will we find when we look at the map, Sam? How do you determine neighborhoods that have greater access than others, for example?
So we're relying on two sources of information for the map. The first is the census information that gives us the neighborhood boundaries and population levels. And then the second is data from OpenStreetMap, which is a public open data set of businesses and resources. So that's how we're mapping things like healthcare, how many pharmacies, how many walk-in clinics are in a neighborhood. And when we look at community spaces, for example, we're not just looking at city community centers, but service clubs and nonprofits and faith communities. And all of that gets averaged out by population so that we can see per capita really how much access is there per neighborhood.
You shared the example a moment ago of a youth in Cambridge that needs access to mental health supports but can only get them in North Waterloo, just again as an example. But when you look at this map on the whole, Sam, what sorts of things did you learn from this?
Yeah, the map gives us a really high-level view, and what we can learn is one of the most surprising things that we learned actually was how well the rural townships did on the map. They have a lot of community services, a lot of community centers and places for people to gather, and that really pushed them up in the rankings. So, of course, we need to invest more in healthcare and transit for the townships, but there were some other areas where they scored very well on.
What neighborhoods are suffering the most in terms of a lack of access?
I think if you drill down into the information, you'll see different neighborhoods having different needs. I really hesitate to treat this map as a ranking, a definitive ranking of this is the best neighborhood and this is the worst neighborhood. But I'm really hoping that people can dig into it and see, transportation is a real priority here, or community space is a real priority here, or green space. And that's a catalyst for communities and neighbors to get together and either advocate for new investments, or I think this is also an opportunity for organizations to collaborate with each other. We talked a lot in the roundtable discussions with all of our 65 organizations about space. How can we share resources? And there's a lot of buildings that could be used for community programming. Some of the barriers to that are very practical. They have to do with access and security and scheduling. And if we can solve some of those issues, I think we can unlock a lot more access to services for people in our region.
I'm wondering, Sam, just by what you're saying there, if the idea here would be that by identifying where these gaps exist, then collectively, as a community, as a region, we can begin to fill those gaps. And in some ways, in some cases, perhaps just by identifying the gap, we can recognize that the infrastructure already exists if we just put it to better use.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much potential and there's so many resources available in our region. The other thing that this map does is it tries to have a discussion about where is access, where is the access most felt. If we talk about new investments in the region, like large investments such as Phase 2 Ion or a new hospital, it's not enough to just say that we have it somewhere in the region, but what does healthcare access look like for people in every neighborhood, for example?
Does this map get shared with every council across the region? What's the plan for that? Like, who's it for?
Yeah, so we just released it this week, and we did share it with all elected officials at both levels of local government as well as provincial government. However, there have been ongoing discussions at the staff level with city staff, with strategic planning efforts, with Parks and Recreation. And so I think there's a lot of collaboration opportunity here where we know that the municipalities have data and plans of their own that maybe could help make this map better. And then our grassroots research could also inform policy development.
Is the map, Sam, a finished product? Is it static, or how do you keep it updated moving forward?
No, it's not at all static. This is something that we know is going to evolve as our region grows. And partnerships are really at the heart of everything we do with 1 Million Neighbors. So we've brought this an early stage of this to the Future Cities Institute master's program at the University of Waterloo, and we're looking to get academics more involved with interpreting that data and helping us reach better conclusions. The map itself, the tool, was developed by a group called Civic Tech Waterloo Region, which is software developers and data scientists who want to volunteer their time for civic projects. So this is a real collaboration between nonprofits, neighborhood associations, volunteers, and professionals in academia.
I think it's a fantastic endeavor, and I look forward to watching it bear fruit as time moves on. Sam, thanks very much for joining the show this morning.
Thank you very much.
Sam Nabby is a project coordinator with 1 Million Neighbors, a collaboration that began a couple of years ago as really from the grassroots level. You can hear in Sam's description there. Stakeholders came together and started asking the question, are we 1 million ready? And I keep coming back to that phrasing because that was exactly the phrasing that Regional Chair Karen Redmond used in her State of the Region address last year, 1 million ready being the theme. And of course, we already touched on it this morning on the show with the water issues that the region is having, and the City of Kitchener still deciding to approve some developments, albeit with holding provisions. But the water issue that we are currently experiencing suggests that we are not anywhere near 1 million ready. But that's at sort of a macro level when we talk about an incredibly important resource to support the population. What Sam and his colleagues are getting down to here is what is going on in our neighborhoods and what kinds of services exist, where the gaps are, and how we can fill those gaps. And that example of, perhaps an underused building, right? Maybe we get so distracted by other things we may not recognize, and that's why I really love this effort here. We may not recognize that neighborhood A is being underserved when there is an underused building right within that neighborhood that could automatically lift its ranking, right? And if you'll forgive me for being the old person in the room here for a moment, I can't help but think back on the times when the churches in our neighborhoods were central points for a lot of these things, right? Raise your hand if you ever went to a spaghetti dinner in the basement of a church. And I'm not saying they don't continue to exist. I just don't feel as though they are happening in as great a number as they used to. Perhaps the attendance at them is not as great as it once was, but that was a regular occurrence. I remember playing in intramural sports leagues through our church when I was a kid. And this occurred to me some years ago while out for a walk. In fact, it was probably right around the time I started noticing all of the churches, like even in the area just around my home. I started, counting them off. I'm like, you can't swing a cat without hitting a church around here. And what a central feature they were in neighborhoods. And that's when I got the idea, hey, since church attendance is dwindling, could we use these properties for housing? That's a separate issue. I'm just thinking of the church, though. And look around your neighborhood. I'm sure it is remarkably similar. So many churches for different denominations, fine, in every neighborhood. And they used to be such a central focal point of that neighborhood's well-being, that neighborhood's connectedness. We have certainly moved away from that. One of the other things that I recall, and I was thinking about in listening to Sam talk about this map this morning, is the opportunity that used to exist. And I say used to because I don't think this is happening at all anymore. If it is, I know you can correct me, and I'm pretty sure it stopped because liability became such an issue. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but how many of you, much like the spaghetti dinner question I asked a moment ago, how many of you at one point used or had access to a school gymnasium to play some floor hockey, shoot some hoops, whatever it happened to be? And I look at schools as an addition to or a complement to existing community centers, just by way of example. My buddies and I did that all the ding-dang time, right? Play some ball hockey in the winter, whatever. We would use school gymnasium space. We rented it for some level. I don't remember what it cost, but distributed amongst all of us. We thought it was a fair price to pay, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know if that's happening at all anymore. Something tells me, we even talked about it years and years and years ago, perhaps in the years when I was a fill-in talk show host, just going off the top of my head here. But I feel as though that came to an end because, again, primarily the liability issue, perhaps even on the school board side of things, the staffing issue, who's there to let people in and make sure the place gets locked up after them. I don't know. But these are the sorts of degradations, if you will, in community services that have left, I would submit to you, some of these neighborhoods with these gaps in access to service. Each neighborhood on this new map, the neighborhood service map, has been ranked as most access, average access, or least access based on the following factors: transit, green space. Hey, talk to all the new condo dwellers in downtown Kitchener about green space, right? Their green space is essentially Victoria Park. That's why there's a whole lot of talk about the Bram Street yards being turned into, at least in some ways, green space. Schools, healthcare, libraries, and community spaces. And just on the healthcare front, I know I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse here, but when we look at the location of our new super hospital, if you will, out there in Northwest Waterloo, how accessible is that going to be for most or many of the new neighborhoods that are being created today? It's really interesting time. So most access, average access, least access based on access to transit, access to green space, access to schools, access to healthcare, access to libraries, access to community spaces. You can see the map for yourself just by visiting our website, kitchener.citynews.ca. But I wonder, if you were to look at the neighborhood where you live, what gaps in service do you see? What are you lacking in your neighborhood that you would love to see included in the place that you live? We'll take your calls right after this quick time out. It's the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
The map gives us a really high-level view, and what we can learn is one of the most surprising things that we learned actually was how well the rural township did on the map. They have a lot of community services, a lot of community centers, and places for people to gather, and that really pushed them up in the ranking. So, of course, we need to invest more in healthcare and transit for the township, but there were some other areas where they scored very well on.
Sam Nabby is a project coordinator with 1 Million Neighbors, looking at our growth, our acceleration towards 1 million residents through a different lens, kind of through that grassroots lens, as opposed to looking at it through the political lens. It's been talked about an awful lot, how we become, or if we are, 1 million ready. And in the case of 1 Million Neighbors, they're looking at our neighborhoods. They've created the neighborhood service map, the link to which you can find on our website, kitchener.citynews.ca. And they are finding that clearly not every neighborhood is served the same. Generally, Kitchener and Waterloo are better served than Cambridge, according to the results in this map. But there are pockets in all three cities that rank least access for different reasons. Again, looking at the factors of transit, green space, schools, healthcare, libraries, and community spaces. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. I blame this show. I really do. It's this show's fault for my view of this region through an entirely different lens. I'm thinking on these factors, and I will bet you, in fact, I better go check the neighborhood service map and see how mine works out. But I'll bet you I'm in the average to most access area. I mean, I can walk to the nearest transit stop, and it's right on a main line and a bunch of different things. The main branch of the Kitchener Public Library isn't all that far away. Heck, I've walked to Midtown, Rennet Midtown. It's a long walk, but it's a walk for appointments in healthcare in the past, etc. Plenty of green space. I'm not all that far from Victoria Park downtown and other places, but I could go on and on. When I look, though, at our community, when I see a new neighborhood under construction, when I consider, and this is, I don't know if this was the first one I just noticed it from or where we heard the most complaints from back in the day. I don't know. But Activa, and I'm not trying to pick on you, Activa, at all. But that was another one of the examples used in this community as sprawling out. And the poor folks that got shoehorned in there, those houses are pretty ding-dang close together, aren't they? How do you get adequate service into a neighborhood like that? And by service, I mean the transit, for example. Libraries. I remember this goes back many, many years, but I used to be a volunteer trustee on our Kitchener Public Library Board. And we were watching the growth in the southwest part of Kitchener, which would include Activa and even further southwest than that. And we were talking about getting the southwest branch of the library built. This is way back, gosh, when was I there? 06, 07, in and around that time. So almost 20 years ago, sitting on this library board talking about getting library access into those neighborhoods. And it went well beyond my time on the board, and the timelines kept getting pushed back further and further. I know it has finally arrived, but it was a long time coming. So for all that time, this new neighborhood didn't have that kind of access to service within it. And part of it makes me wonder, is it growth that is too rapid, or is it vision on the part of the planners and the councillors that is too narrow? Hopefully, this neighborhood service map helps us out in that regard. Again, you can check it out for yourself via our website, kitchener.citynews.ca. Got to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then, as you've been hearing throughout the day so far in our weather reports, it's going to get a lot colder. There are some flurries on the way. We've had some rather wicked weather, I would say, so far this winter, with not just snow, but freezing rain, ice pellets. And sometimes when the snow comes, it comes in a great big heap. And there is one municipal organization that's having a whale of a time keeping its areas, the areas it is responsible for, clear of snow. And that's causing problems. We'll talk about them next on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. By the way, just going back to that last segment very quickly, looking at the new map, giving us a glimpse of neighborhood services in the region. In fact, I do live in a neighborhood that is green for most access. Why? Because it's a post-World War II neighborhood, established, serviced decades ago. And now here we are. I do wonder, is it rapid growth or lack of vision? Maybe a mixture of both, but I'll just leave that there. I just thought about it. I should have done that beforehand. And then as we were talking, I said out loud, I'll bet you if I were to look, I'd be in the average to most access area. And sure enough, my neighborhood pops up as most access. So very well served. And again, forgive me for extending it just a little bit further, but wouldn't it be interesting? We said this the other day about air travel and our politicians who are federally responsible for, the code of conduct or the what passengers, the passengers code of conduct, what we should expect to receive, this, that, the other thing. We should have those MPs fly the kinds of flights that we are on, not the kinds that they get to be on all the time. Maybe to help with these gaps in access to services in various neighborhoods, we should have the folks that we elect live in those neighborhoods that don't have the same access and, let them experience it for a little while. Because what's my lens if I wasn't driving around and having these conversations on the show and then thinking about how is this new neighborhood going to be serviced? You wouldn't really give it much thought. I could be perfectly insulated in my little most access neighborhood and think everything is just tickety-boo, when in fact, just outside that neighborhood, it is not so tickety-boo. But I digress, and we'll move on to the next issue of the day, because this is something that is certainly not tickety-boo. Folks who rely on transit in this community have been raising their voices for the past week or so because the stops at Grand River Transit are not being cleared of snow quickly enough, and that is making these transit stops inaccessible. It's not just inconvenient. If you can climb the snowbank that's there, great. What if you can't? What if you are using some kind of mobility device? You've got yourself a problem. And one of the problems I have with this, aside from the fact that this is an ongoing issue, it seems, year after year after year, but for Grand River Transit, the mandate for clearance of the snow at stops is 48 hours after the snowfall. As homeowners, we're expected to do it within 24 hours. Why in HE double hockey sticks does Grand River Transit get twice the time? I quite frankly do not understand the logic behind that, but nonetheless, let's have the conversation with my good friend Edward Farwell, who's the executive director at KW Accessibility. There's an A there because they are able, they're just differently abled. But these kinds of circumstances make life incredibly challenging. So, Edward, considering, and I'm willing to give a little bit of a mulligan here, considering the kind of winter that we have had. It has been strange with ice and freezing rain and ice pellets and all these different things. But clearing snow is clearing snow. And as you've tried to make your way around this winter, what sorts of challenges have you been facing?
Oh, man, Mother Nature has not been kind to us. It's been tough. Sidewalks in general are just awful. This year it's worse than any other year that I've experienced in a long, long time. With all the snow melting and freezing and melting and freezing, it's really tough to, get down to the bare pavement.
And in particular, Edward, one of the challenges that we have noticed this year, and it really hit home for me because I have heard you advocating about this in the past. We're talking about transit stops, and they're not cleared to a sufficient level that you can get a wheelchair onto a bus right now because there's too much snow.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. There's no way if people don't clear the sidewalks and clear the bus stops, it's impossible for someone with a disability to get around. Mike, it almost reminds me back 5-6 years ago when COVID was there. People are stuck in their apartments. They can't go anywhere. It's awful.
And here's the situation just because of the weather. Now, I understand with Grand River Transit that they have a policy of 48 hours from a snowfall to clear the snow at transit stops. I think that might be long to begin with, but it doesn't appear as though they're getting to them at all. And I know it's not easy work with the kind of weather we've had. It's very icy, but where do we go looking here for a solution, Edward?
Well, that's a really tough question. I mean, I think the cities and the municipalities might have to step in and help out a little more, because right now just leaving it to individuals and, Grand River Transit, and I know they use contractors, and the contractors are just swamped with all the other people too. So I think definitely the region and the city needs to step to the plate.
I mentioned earlier that I've heard you advocating in this regard before. Have you had any conversations, through your role at KW Accessibility or otherwise, to talk to the region or talk to GRT and try to get some action here?
Well, I am on the advisory committee, mobility advisory committee for Grand River Transit, and it's a topic that we do discuss and remind them that things need to be done. We keep getting assurances that, they're doing the best that they can, but if bus stops aren't cleared 48, sometimes 72 hours, that's pretty rough on people.
Do you have a workaround at all, Edward? Not that I think anybody should have to. The bus stop is the bus stop, and it should be accessible to everyone. But if you arrive at a particular bus stop and there's too much snow for you to maneuver your wheelchair through, how do you get onto that bus?
Well, the first challenge is getting to the bus stop, but assuming that I can get to the bus stop, most of the drivers are very accommodating in that they will try and pull ahead to the next available opening, either a driveway or possibly at the intersection of the next street corner. But a lot of times street corners are plowed in when the plows go around the corner. The ramps at the street corners are also plowed in. So it's a challenge.
I'm glad there is a workaround. Again, not that you should have to experience that. The bus stop is the bus stop. But you said something else, too, about if you can get to the bus stop. And we kind of touched on this at the beginning of the conversation, given the kind of winter that it's been. But can you take us through a winter morning in the life of someone such as yourself, Edward, who gets around by wheelchair, how challenging it can be? Can you kind of take us through what it's like?
Well, it's super frustrating, Mike, because, you could be going down the sidewalk and 8 houses in a row might have shoveled the snow off the sidewalk and it's nice and clear. And then you get to the 9th house and they didn't do anything. So now I have to go all the way back and try and either go around the block the other way or, which is super dangerous, to go and drive on the road. And with all the big snowbanks on the side of the road, that means a lot of times someone in a wheelchair is out in the traffic, and that is just not acceptable.
I wondered about that very thing because most days I'm out with the dog, we're taking our walk. I experience some of these challenges. Some, again, on foot, it's not too bad, and especially because I'm able to maneuver through or over some of this stuff. But I've thought at times it's easier just to kind of duck down this driveway, go out on the road, come back in. But depending on the road that you're on or how quickly you're able to move in a wheelchair, that's got to be a somewhat harrowing experience for you.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is that most people that use wheelchairs don't stand they're not very tall. So cars could come around the corner and just not see somebody. So, yeah, it's a last resort for sure. There's been a couple times when I've gone all the way back and tried to go around the block the other way just to avoid going on a busy street.
Is there anything, Edward, that we as a community can do to support the efforts in this regard? I mean, I personally would like to see, at minimum, GRT having a standard of 24 hours like homeowners do, but I don't know what else. Is there anything we can do as a community to support folks such as yourself that meet these challenges every day in the winter?
I think it comes down to education. I think we need to start talking about this. I mean, you're doing a great job in raising these issues, but we need to be out there. I think also people who are facing these issues need to get on the phone and call bylaw. If there's an issue, don't be shy to say, hey, I can't get around. And, if there's that many calls going out there, maybe something will get done.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Advocating for oneself, and for those listening in on this conversation today, just the reminder that it's not just those, if we have trouble walking, that's only one part of the problem in the winter. We've got folks with walkers, with wheelchairs, and all kinds of other mobility devices that can make things difficult. My friend, I really appreciate your time on the show today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Mike, appreciate you, and it's always a pleasure.
I'm looking forward, just real quick before I let you go. I mean, you and I get together at least once a year when the weather's a whole heck of a lot better. So let's just think a little bit about June in your next golf tournament, okay?
Oh, man, it's our 10th annual. We are so looking forward to that.
I cannot wait. We'll see you at Galt Country Club, but thanks again for this today.
All right, Mike. Have a great day.
Edward Farwell is the executive director at KW Accessibility. He joins us to talk about the challenges that this winter has presented. And it has been a different kind of winter, right? As I said at the outset, I'm willing to give a bit of a mulligan here when it comes to the freezing rain events and the ice pellets and all of these other things that have been hitting us. But if you make your way around our community, you will find that most places are still pretty passable in terms of getting across the sidewalks and whatnot. And it doesn't matter. Edward and I made reference to it in that conversation. Whether it's this year and you want to be generous and give a bit of a mulligan or not, this has been an ongoing issue at transit stops. And I cannot, for the life of me, understand how, after all of these years, it remains an issue. My friends over at CTV Kitchener were joking yesterday, and not at the expense of those who are trapped by this, but the joke is that they could pull out the same story every year, not edit it at all, and just replay it because the same thing keeps coming up. And I don't know why we allow a municipal service like Grand River Transit to get away with this unacceptable level of snow clearing. It doesn't make sense to me. And for anyone who thinks, and you know how I feel, I don't want to reopen or reignite the debate about municipal sidewalk clearing. But if you've ever thought that a municipality should be responsible for clearing every sidewalk in the community, why don't we start with the transit service clearing every transit stop? How is this a difficult thing to do? I find myself a little confused on the issue, but maybe you've got the answer that I can't see in plain sight. So please do inform me. What do we got to do to get transit stops cleared of these huge snowbanks? Phone lines are open to you. Ideas are welcome. It's the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
I think the cities and the municipalities might have to step in and help out a little more, because right now just leaving it to individuals and Grand River Transit, and I know they use contractors, and the contractors are just swamped with all the other people too. So I think definitely the region and the city needs to step to the plate.
Edward Farwell is the executive director of KW Accessibility, and he shares with us the challenges that he and others are facing in getting around town, in particular, using transit because transit stops have not been adequately cleared of snow. Clive sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. He says, Mike, what is the region doing correctly? It's time for a change. Every time I drive down Bridge Street. Days after a snowfall, I see a number of people in wheelchairs using the bike lane. It's very sad how we set priorities. And this is where I get confused too, Clive. This is an ongoing issue. Year after year, winter after winter, we talk about it. How on earth can we not get transit stops cleared of snow? I see those little machines that clear out pathways. There's one that comes to do the pathway leading to the schoolyard that's across the street from my house. How can we not have one of those to go and clear out the transit stops? Explain that to me, please, because I am at a loss to explain how we're missing it. Let's go to the phones and hear from you. Bob, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I was just listening to your call, actually, and I just got into this industry recently, and I was working, actually, with a contractor that was working with the GRT, but they lost it due to the fact that they couldn't keep up with it.
Really? Couldn't keep up with it?
Yep, it's just these snowbanks or the manpower or people don't show up. I didn't realize that this was all contracted out when I got into it. I thought actually the region took care of it, but it's all contracted out.
I wasn't surprised to learn that it was contracted out, but I would have thought then if you're, if you're putting it out for tender, then that contractor would have the manpower to do the job. So they don't, you're telling me.
Well, at least with the last one I was with.
Yeah.
Good luck to the new person that got it. But, I drive around and I see sometimes some of these stops, they're not really fully clean for even the elderly, never mind just the people in wheelchairs.
It's another good point.
It's pretty horrendous.
Yeah, it really is. Bob, appreciate hearing from you today. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you. This is, I understand. Look, I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend this is easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's far from impossible, isn't it? But at least the company that Bob was with couldn't even get enough people out to get the job done. Paul is on the phone. Good morning, Paul.
Morning, Mike. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents worth in so you can kind of get a bit of history on it. Many years ago, the city of Kitchener looked after the city of Kitchener bus stops. Can't say what happened in Waterloo, but I know Kitchener did it. And the expectation for the employees was that they would do all their sidewalks, and then it was known that we had to get out and do the regional bus stops. And unfortunately, because we had to do everything else first, it generally ended up to be all on overtime. And so it cost the region quite a bit. And that's why they ended up scrubbing the city from doing it and contracting it out. And there was a huge difference in quality and expectations as soon as the contractors took over. We noticed right away that they weren't there. It was days later. Whereas when we did it, I'm not sure if it was because it was all a corporation or all a government thing, but the expectation was pretty high that we had to get out there and do it and get it done, and they had to be done right. And it hasn't been that way since it's been contracted out. And
there was no way, Paul, that you recall we could have worked around the overtime issue? Like, is there part-time staff that could be hired? Anything else as opposed to just giving up and contracting it out?
No. There's so short-staffed for snow as it is. It's right at the limit. It's all about money, Mike. It's
for sure.
About the budget. It's the budgets and manpower and equipment. And I know from Kitchener's perspective, they're right at the limit. There's lots of times when I was still there that you'd get one or two people would be sick, and all of a sudden there's a route or two that aren't covered. The other guys have to pick it up, and it's easy to fall behind. It's like the on-time delivery for the automotive industry. It's very time sensitive, and yeah, I just don't see how they could have gotten around it without getting into overtime. And if they want the city to help out now, everything's on shift work now. I imagine they could, but it's changed now because back then we weren't on shifts, whereas now they are. It's like I say, it comes down to the cash.
Yeah, I don't doubt that one bit. Paul, I appreciate the call. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Great to hear from you today. And I know the time sensitivity, right? Because the longer it takes or the further behind you fall, the more difficult the job becomes. And I'm not disputing the cost associated here too, but what the hell good is a transit stop if people can't use it to get on the bus? Rhetorical question, I know, but come on with your coming on. It's the Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. So about a month ago, I got an email with a link to a story that talked about a tire recycling facility up near Ottawa that was essentially overflowing with tires. And the subject line or the content of the email mocked the Ford government, another Ford failure or something like that. And that's fine. I consumed the story and quite frankly, didn't think a whole lot more about it. And then, as you know, just a couple of weeks ago, between Christmas and New Year's, I happened to be up in the northern parts of this province with the Kitchener Rangers, went through Sudbury, and couldn't help but notice this, what I said to myself, I'm like, what is with this tire mountain that's forming over here? And it turns out that there are about 500,000 tires in this particular, or on this particular site, which is a private recycling site. But why are all of these tires just sitting there? 500,000 of them by some estimates. Adam Moffat is the executive director of the Ontario Tire Dealers Association, joins us to talk more about it. Adam, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
What is happening here? Why are these two sites, one near Ottawa, this one up in the Sudbury area, essentially overflowing with tires?
Well, essentially what we saw was last year in January, revisions were made to the Ontario tire recycling regulation that lowered the producer responsibility obligations. And, long story short, what we're seeing is the effect of producers hitting their obligated targets in 2025 months in advance of December, the end of the year, and effectively the producer responsibility organizations that the producers have hired to manage their tire collections effectively started, in some cases, stopping tire collections in general, and others significantly scaling back tire collections through the province and recycling. And that has led to stockpiling not only of the two piles that you've identified in the Sudbury and Ottawa regions, but tire dealers, municipalities, automotive recycling facilities across the province are still struggling to this day with excessive amounts of tires, not being able to have tires collected in an efficient manner, and really putting a lot of people in bad positions, whether it be positions with unsafe circumstances, potential, fire-related issues, mischief-related issues, and we're now hearing as well from a lot of dealers and automotive centers that they're having issues with landlords and municipalities over stockpiles of tires right now. Why were the requirements changed last year? So that's a good question, and honestly, we don't have a definitive answer on that. It's clear that somebody has lobbied the provincial government. They lobbied to have the targets lowered. There was a lot of pressure over the last couple of years in 2023 and 2024 where producers were not hitting their obligated targets, and there was questions around whether the targets were too high and too aggressive. That's a really long-winded story, but essentially we saw a discrepancy where some pro networks were collecting more tires than they were obligated for, and others were collecting less tires than they were obligated for. But the reasoning behind the changes in January, we really don't have a definitive answer. What data was used, what kind of industry recommendation was brought forward. But most certainly from our point of view, whether or not the targets leading up to this January of last year were achievable, we certainly didn't have a position where there was stockpiles of tires around the province. So effectively lowering the provincial targets to a point where stockpiles occur seems, in our opinion, a much worse circumstance than having producers who may not have been able to hit their targets, but certainly not having tires flooding around the province right now. Well, and that's what I'm sitting here thinking right now, Adam. It feels like the law of unintended consequences here. And if we've got these two massive sites that are clearly visible, and you've identified other issues kind of
on the ground in municipalities with tire dealers, etc. I can imagine that this is only going to get worse before it gets better. Like, we'll have more and more of these stockpiles, will we not?
Well, certainly, and one of our big concerns is, and we brought forward to both the RPRA and the MECP, is all of these stockpiled tires as well that are carrying over from 2025 now into 2026. It's very likely that these tires will be used to achieve producer targets in 2026, which means if producers were hitting targets as early as September of last year, based on the amount of tires carrying forward, it's pretty realistic to believe that the same producers will be potentially hitting their targets middle to the end of summer this year, which will put us in a really bad position, much earlier than we experienced in 2025.
Certainly, the province can't be oblivious to what's going on. The stories are gaining traction. They're appearing in larger and larger publications, et cetera. We're having a conversation like this. Is there any hint of movement from Queen's Park here to remedy this?
There is. So our association and several other associations that we're partnering with as we navigate and try to fight through this are speaking with the RPRA, the registrar. We are speaking with the MECP and engaging with the minister's office now. The challenge is the way the regulation is written today. The RPRA, the regulator, is really limited in what action they can take. Effectively, they can only manage the regulation as it's written. And, based on comment the RPRA has made in print media, they don't believe that, while the issues are there and present and everybody's aware, they can really take any effective action because the regulation doesn't allow them to. So we have escalated our approach now, going back to the MECP and now to the minister's office, requesting that they do a regulatory reform. That's really going to be, in the long term, what needs to happen. But currently and effectively right now, really we need the minister's office, if possible, to step in, intervene, make sure that the producers and pros are collecting the tires, not allowing them to stockpile. And this needs to happen pretty quick because, we're quickly coming up to the second busiest time of year for tire dealers, our spring tire changeover season. Well, it's not as large as the winter tire changeover season. It still represents a very large amount of tires that'll be entering the network. And if we don't have the collection network reestablished and the stockpiles dealt with that we're currently seeing, there's really no hope going into the spring changeover season that this will improve without the minister stepping in.
Forgive me for my ignorance here, but I'm thinking as a consumer, Adam, about the tire tax that I pay. Is that not to cover the costs of this recycling, or is that just for the maintenance on the roads?
So just to be clear, it's not technically a tax. The fees that are charged on all of the tires, they come through the producer responsibility networks. So the regulation itself doesn't address any of the consumer fees. The regulation specifically says if you're a producer, these are your obligations. You figure out how you're going to manage it. So the producer responsibility organizations, the pros, they're the ones who set the independent fees through their network. They then carry those fees to the manufacturers and the producers, who then carry those fees down the retail chain. But in short, yes, the fees that are being charged when a consumer buys a tire is to fund the recycling of tires as they come back into the system, which effectively today in a lot of cases isn't happening. Right? We shouldn't have stockpiles of tires floating around the province.
How do they end up in places like this being stockpiled?
Well, that becomes an interesting question because at some point in time through the service chain, so whether it's a recycler, one of the scrap tire haulers, or the pros, somebody somewhere has to be dictating to stockpile these tires. Nobody's come forward at this point in time to say, well, this was done under our direction. But somebody in that point and level has to be doing it. Now, I don't know that it necessarily would be the service providers themselves. If you're a tire hauler, you're probably not going to want to take the liberty of stockpiling massive amount of tires. There's a lot of liability that comes with that. So, but nobody's formally come forward and acknowledged or, accept responsibility on this. But somebody within that service chain has most certainly directed this to take place.
The tires that are recycled, 65% of them now with the lower targets, but where do they end up? How do they end up coming back into our economy?
So typically what happens is a manufacturer imports a tire in, the tire goes through the retail chain, and it's presumably when a consumer purchases a new tire, they leave a scrap tire behind at the location they bought it from. So we'll say a tire dealer for sake of the conversation. That tire dealer will accumulate the tires at their location, and they'll have a tire hauler, a transporter come in who will pick up those tires. That tire transporter, they work under the Pro networks, and through their contract with the Pro, they'll deliver those tires to one of the recycling facilities that's in the province of Ontario, or they'll drop the tires off at a accumulation yard where they'll accumulate loads for transportation efficiency going to a processor. The processors then, who are also contracted back through the producer responsibility organizations, they'll recycle a tire. They'll pull out all of the metals, those will go for recycling, they'll pull out the fibrous materials, and they'll pull out the rubber. And then the rubber itself is sold by the recycling companies to the end product manufacturers. And there's a whirlwind of products that are manufactured. You see everything from rubberized asphalt products, you'll see flooring tiles, you'll see pavement garden tiles and edging and so forth. So eventually, once a tire is collected and it works its way through the system, the raw product, the crumb rubber, the shredded rubber, will ultimately get re-injected into typically new molded products that hit the market.
I'm sure that as the executive director of the Ontario Tire Dealers Association, you're hearing from dealers, you're hearing from your members. How concerned are you, Adam, about where we're at with this recycling issue in the province?
Yeah, we're extremely concerned. We started getting, back in September of last year when one of the pros announced they had hit their provincial targets for their producers and they had shut down operations. We started immediately bringing it forward to the MECP and the RPRA. We brought concerns forward saying, look, you can't have one of the major recycling systems close and expect the other systems to pick up the pace, especially going into the busiest time of year when that infrastructure likely doesn't exist. Early December last year, the other remaining pros started scaling back as they also started notifying that they were hitting their producer responsibility obligations. And that's when things really started to escalate. Even to today, I'm getting calls daily. I got 3 calls this morning from dealers across the province saying that, they still aren't getting collections. We're now mid-January. And we're hearing right now that some of these stockpiles are starting to get addressed, but now the challenge is, sounds like the stockpiled tires at some of these large sites are now filling the recycling facilities, and the local haulers who are trying to deal with the current flow of tires are now being bumped back because these stockpiles are taking precedence. So had the pro networks not stopped providing service or significantly scaled back service last December, we wouldn't be in the situation right now. We would typically have a small inventory of tires that rolls forward because of the busy season, but never to this level. And it is going to be problematic. Myself, as a former processor, ran processing sites in the province, and this volume of tires, we're talking several months just to get through some of these stockpiled tires, let alone the new generation of tires that's occurring in the province.
It's an incredible story. I didn't think much of it the first time, but when I saw this site up near Sudbury, I thought, wow, we are really into something here. Appreciate the perspective, Adam. Thank you very much for joining the show.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Adam Moffat is the executive director of the Ontario Tire Dealers Association. I guess it helps to see it with your own eyes. Our poor friends in Sudbury. This is the thing, right? Queen's Park, heart of Toronto. What do you know? What do you see? I would love to hear. Maybe I should check in with the MPP for Sudbury and find out. And Stittsville up near Ottawa. Like, this is just, it's wild to me. And the $1 million question, and you heard Adam's response to it. I mean, that's the big question. Why were these recycling targets lowered from 85% to 65% in the first place? And you can see how these backlogs have begun so quickly, right? These producers are meeting their requirements by September, so they no longer, they've met the 65% target. They don't have to recycle anymore. Thus begins the stockpile. And if they met that target in September this year, and as we finished that conversation, you heard Adam talking about the months that it will take just to get through the stockpile. But as you're into a new year, going through that stockpile will now count towards the 65% of recycling you need to complete. So by what point next year? July? June? Will they have reached that 65% of tires being recycled, and then we're right back into stockpiling some more? An absolutely incredible situation unfolding. And I would again say it's the law of unintended consequences. Why did we change the regulations in the first place? And how in HE double hockey sticks do we change them back? Surely the province can see the mess that is beginning here across Ontario. We'll take your calls right after this on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
If producers were hitting targets as early as September of last year, based on the amount of tires carrying forward, it's pretty realistic to believe that the same producers will be potentially hitting their targets middle to the end of summer this year, which will put us in a really bad position much earlier than we experienced in 2025.
Adam Moffat is the executive director of the Ontario Tire Dealers Association. It started near Ottawa. Now it's up in the Sudbury area, these huge stockpiles of tires as these producers meet their recycling targets early. Why? Because the province reduced from 85% to 65% the requirement for recycling. The 85% collection and management rate was changed to a 65% management rate, which means tire producers have to recycle, retread, or reuse 65% of the tires by weight that they put on the Ontario market. And that target doesn't change again until 2030. But it was at 85%. We dropped it to 65% for some reason. And now that stockpile near Sudbury is estimated at some 500,000 tires. Diane sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. citing eco-green equipment out of the States that says one of the more inventive ways to use old tires is in constructing buildings like homes and shelters, which is wonderful if we can get them to that stage of their life cycle. The problem is we're stockpiling right now, at least here in Ontario. Let's go to the phones. Walter is with us. Good morning, Walter.
Good morning there, Mike. Do you remember, excuse me, a number of years ago when they had all those tires were stockpiled down in Hagersville, and what happened?
Oh, I remember the fire. You bet I remember the fire.
So that's always a concern right there, isn't it? Because that was a big problem.
My biggest concern, frankly, Walter, is what was the motivation behind changing the regulation?
I don't know, but I will tell you that as a homeowner and a property owner and whatnot, that I've been looking at this place out of Calgary, and I'm sure they have outfits around here but it's called EuroShield, and they take recycled tires and they make them into roofing material. And, like instead of asphalt or metal or whatever else you want to use, like slate or whatever, or wood. And they have a very long lifespan, compared to other products. And on top of that, they're really hard to actually cause any damage to. That where they're sold a lot is in hurricane areas. Like it's a company out of Calgary, and I'm impressed by them. Sure, everything has their pros and their cons and whatnot, but I mean, it has like a 50-year span that they'll hang around compared to like usually asphalt shingles are like about 20 years, if that. And there's always that angle, like also in roads and, I'm sure they could, if they had some people that, put their head together that are a lot smarter than me. But I don't know about you, but me, and they could put them together to, come up with even other, fantastic ideas. But I just thought I'd throw that out there, Mike.
Thanks, Walter. Good to hear from you today. It's estimated that with 1.6 billion tires entering the market annually, another 1 billion exit the market. That's a whole lot of rubber. And again, the big question here is why did the province lower the rate of management and recycling of tires anyway? They had to be lobbied in some regard for this change, but they have now created themselves a wee bit of a situation only 1 year since the change was made. Stockpiles near Ottawa and now up in Sudbury as well. I called it Tire Mountain when I saw it a couple of weeks ago. I had no idea what was behind it. And sometimes you wish you didn't know, but these are the problems that we are facing right now in the province, thanks to a seemingly insignificant or odd change. I didn't hear a lot of people lobbying for it, but here we are. I'm going to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then something that we have been lobbying for and talking about for quite some time is the $10 a day childcare program in this province. But will we ever realize it? Let's talk about it on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Talk about $10 a day childcare, shall we? I mean, it's something that has been talked about an awful lot. The question becomes, is there a reality on the ground, particularly here in Ontario, when it comes to $10 a day childcare? Can or are we actually finding it in the province? Carolyn Ferns is a policy coordinator with the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare and joins us for the conversation. Carolyn, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for making the time because, as I mentioned, we talk about this quite a bit. In fact, when the program was introduced, it was met with some fanfare. But here we are all this time later, and we're trying to figure out what the reality looks like on the ground.
Yeah.
So are we getting closer to the arrival of $10 a day childcare here in the province of Ontario?
Yeah. So here in the province of Ontario, we have not reached $10 a day. Fees right now for programs that are part of the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, fees are capped at $22 a day. With low-income subsidies, that means an average of $19. Fees were supposed to drop this very year down to an average of $10 a day. But, you know, the Ontario government and the federal government did not reach a new 5-year funding agreement and instead they signed a 1-year extension that just keeps things exactly as they were in 2025. So right now, fee reductions are stalled and are not going to be dropping, as had been promised, down to 10 a day in March. Fee reductions are stalled. So both levels of government there are breaking, I think, a key affordability promise to families, because that was definitely a very clear promise. We were supposed to get to 10 a day. First, the first goal was September of 2025. Then it was pushed to March of 2026. And now, you know, we don't know. The extension agreement goes till the end of the year, and they still need to negotiate a new agreement after that. So I think it's really important for especially families to know governments are actually breaking a key affordability promise to them, and that it's a good time to push to say, you know, this was the dream, this was the goal, to reach 10-a-day childcare. And it's not a pie-in-the-sky idea, because we know that actually 8 other provinces and territories are already at $10 a day. Right? So it's actually happening in most parts of the country now. It's only Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, that aren't part of this, right? So that aren't at that goal yet. So I think it's really important for families to push on it.
It's so interesting, this story to me, and instructive, because it was the federal government that made the affordability promise, which sounds all well and good on the surface. And then you get into the weeds of it a little bit and you realize, well, before it actually happens, those negotiations have to happen with the individual provinces. So here we are. As you said, 8 have made it. The others have not. What, Carolyn, are the stumbling blocks preventing Ontario from getting there?
Yeah. So the Ontario government has stated, you know, their concern is the funding, right? That they say the federal government, there is a funding gap, that they're not getting enough money from the federal government to actually lower those fees down to $10 a day, and that what they're receiving from the federal government right now, that's where we're at. We're at, lowering them to a cap of 22 and no further. And so that, I think, is going to be what these negotiations are all about. And I think that it's, fair enough to say, Ontario had, before this program started, the highest childcare fees in the country. We had the furthest to go to get down to an average of 10 a day. That's what the Ontario government says. And I think that that is fair. But there's another part of that, though, right, which is that, childcare affordability has been a huge issue in Ontario. And it was a huge issue in Ontario before the federal government stepped up with billions of dollars to help make things better for Ontario families, that helped Ontario families save thousands of dollars in childcare fees. If we want to go further, that's going to benefit families in this province. It's going to benefit the provincial government as much as it benefits the federal government. It benefits, the province's tax revenues to see more families working, to see, the labor force, participation rate go up, all of those things, right? So, I think that what I really hope is that those negotiations look more like, what can the two levels of government do together to really almost supercharge this program, make sure it's reaching more families, make sure that it's really reaching those affordability goals. What can both levels of government do to make that happen, rather than what we've seen, which is just finger pointing at each other, right? Which I don't think gets us anywhere. And I don't think that families have a lot of time for it, frankly. They want to know that there's going to be a childcare space in their community, and they want to know that they're going to be able to afford it.
The affordability aside for a moment, because I think that's pretty evident when we talk about $10 a day childcare. What are the implications, Carolyn, of us not meeting this goal? Again, affordability aside, what are we missing out on here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, affordability has been kind of the main thing that people talk about there. But, the other big part of this is access, right? It's fine to say, we have $10 a day childcare fees, but if you can't find a space at all, that's not going to make any difference. If you're stuck on a wait list, it doesn't make any difference, right? You're having to pay out of your pocket to make all sorts of different, maybe unregulated arrangements or different types of arrangements to care for your child if you can't find one of those spaces. So access and expansion, I think, is a huge part of this. I think that the Ontario government should be much more ambitious in terms of planning and expanding childcare. And then that leads to the other big piece, right? If you think of this as like sort of three big ideas, right? We need affordability, you need access, but for access to happen, you need to have the workforce. And the truth is that a lot of times now, we have childcare centers that aren't at capacity. Maybe they actually have a room closed. So they're not expanding access, not because they don't have the space, but because they don't have the staff. So solving the childcare workforce shortage, making sure we have enough early childhood educators that are working and staying in the sector, that's going to be a big part of solving this access crisis for families, the waitlist crisis for families, is actually making sure we have the staff. So I hope that governments really understand understand the complexity there, and that, investing in the childcare workforce is actually investing in quality programs for young children. It's what makes these programs come alive, right?
What kind of advocacy efforts has the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare undertaken on behalf of families here in Ontario?
That's a great question. So, so our organization, we're a member-based coalition. Our members are childcare programs across Ontario, as well as other social justice groups. And we run campaigns. I mean, we were part of the campaign for 10-a-day childcare, to push the federal government for 10-a-day childcare, to push the Ontario government to sign on. So we've run campaigns exactly on that. We also did a huge campaign on the workforce over the last few years, along with the Association of Early Childhood Educators, so the ECE's professional association, that was called Worth More, because, when this program was first announced, part of it was fee reductions, but part of it was supposed to be improving wages for early childhood educators. But when they came out with the wage floor, it was only $18 an hour for a registered early childhood educator. So the coalition ran a campaign called Worth More that actually put pushed for those wages to be improved. And they've been improved by about $5 an hour now for early childhood educators to try to solve that workforce crisis. And again, that's so important to families because they know, first of all, how valuable early childhood educators' work is because they see it every day with their young kids. And they know how important it is to be able to expand programs. And we don't do that without the workforce. So pushing for families, for affordability, pushing for more access, and pushing for decent work and pay, that's what the coalition's work's all about.
The $10 a day plan was supposed to be here by September, then pushed out to March. You mentioned that our province here in Ontario and the feds have sort of extended or made a one-year deal instead of this five-year deal. How optimistic or pessimistic are you, Carolyn, about Ontario's progress towards this goal ultimately?
Yeah, I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic, right? I'm always, worried. I was certainly worried back in the fall when it looked like there were no negotiations happening. And that's when the coalition actually, we launched a countdown clock to say, if we don't sign on by March, this agreement is going to expire. And we saw actually pretty soon after we launched that as a public campaign that both levels of government got together and there were statements that, yes, they both support the program, that the Ontario government is supportive of the objectives of the goals of the program, but that they had funding concerns. So I think that, we're certainly going to be pushing really hard this year that we need to have, more than another, 1-year extension. We need to have a full 5-year funding commitment. We need both. I think we need the federal government to step up, I think, with more money to extend this program. But we also need to push the Ontario government to be doing everything they can. Because the truth is, if the federal government hadn't come along, all of these concerns would be falling onto them, right? This is a provincial responsibility. So there's more that both levels of government can do. And I think that our organization is going to be pushing them very hard this year to sign a real funding agreement.
Carolyn, I'm so glad we could get you on the show today. Thank you so much for the time.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Mike.
Carolyn Ferns joining us. She is the policy coordinator with the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. And you hear it very plainly right there. It was supposed to arrive, $10 a day childcare in September. Then that deadline got pushed out to March of this year. But here in Ontario, one of just a few provinces that has not yet signed on to this agreement. And essentially what Ontario and the federal government have done is extend by 1 year or made a 1-year deal that will keep things capped at $22 a day as opposed to the $10 a day dream, or I think to put it more accurately, promise that was made. And in this conversation with Carolyn, I described this as instructive, and I can't help but think there are similarities, aren't there, to the issues that we are facing around housing and homelessness here in the region. And all of those folks that attended a regional council meeting last week and just ripped regional council a new one for their lack of action on the homelessness file. When, by the way, the region's spending almost $350 million on a plan to end chronic homelessness, local dollars. I'm not trying to excuse anybody, but the reality of that situation is that the municipality cannot and will not ever solve the problem on its own. It's going to require effort and collaboration from other levels of government as well, both the province and the feds. So look at this story. Remember the promise. I don't mean to invoke a name that is incredibly unpopular still, but Justin Trudeau promised $10 a day childcare, and that was wonderful. It sounds great. The federal government makes the promise, but the devil is always in the details. Oh, you mean in order to make that promise, to fulfill it, to make it come true, we have to negotiate individually with every province. And so they've successfully done that with 8 provinces, but Ontario remains an outlier. And it does not sound like it's happening certainly in calendar 2026. So how do we get to $10 a day childcare here in the province of Ontario? I am long past this stage, and gratefully so, if I may add. I suppose Very early days, I was incredibly fortunate to have a parent of mine, grandparent of my child, for a childcare provider. But I wonder how it is that you are doing it, if indeed you are doing it today, or how you did it when you did it. Because I find these costs to be so astronomical as to be almost impossible to bear. I've heard the stories of folks who decide that one parent is going to stay at home anyway because the cost of childcare is basically the cost of a mortgage payment, or even moreover, you're paying out in childcare what one of you is earning anyway. That's how expensive it can be. So how are you, or how did you pull this whole thing off as we await $10 a day childcare in Ontario? We'll take your calls right after this on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Solving the childcare workforce shortage, making sure we have enough early childhood educators that are working and staying in the sector, that's going to be a big part of solving this access crisis for families, the waitlist crisis for families, is actually making sure we have staff. I hope that governments really understand the complexity there, and that investing in the childcare workforce is actually investing in quality programs for young children. It's what makes these programs come alive.
Most of the provinces in this country have reached the $10 a day childcare agreement, but not Ontario, not Alberta and Saskatchewan either, for that matter. But that was the voice of Carolyn Ferns, who's a policy coordinator with the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. I think there are two questions here. One is, will we ever get there? And Carolyn said she's cautiously optimistic that we will one day arrive at the $10 a day childcare cap here in Ontario. But the question I'm asking you is how you managed it. Maybe you're trying to manage it now. I don't know. But I think that it's an incredibly tough nut to crack, the cost of childcare. And as you wait for the $10 a day plan to get here to Ontario. Let's go to the phones. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
You know, I was fortunate to be, husband and I run our own business, and I was fortunate enough to be able to also take care of our kids when they were young, as we work from home. Was tricky sometimes, and I can tell you at this point, running your own business, probably one of the biggest benefits was the fact that I could be home with my kids, because running your own business is no cup of tea. So I was fortunate to be able to do that. And then also when my grandson was born, I was able to help with him a bit too, and also after school when they were living in our town. So I have trouble. I love the idea that we can have low cost childcare, but I have trouble thinking that $10 a day is realistic to even feed a young child. When you think of the cost of juice and nutritious food and fruit, it just doesn't seem realistic to me, but I wish them all the luck in the world. Hopefully they'll be able to get it down lower than $22 an hour. I know what the cost of food is, and I just have trouble thinking that you could both feed a child and take good, proper care of them for $10 a day. So it's always going to be subsidized in some way. Exactly, Lisa. And that's where the government comes into this, right? So you pay the $10, but that child care provider is having the subsidy from the government make up the difference, so to speak. But I like what you identify there for sure. Doug, good morning.
Hello, Mike.
Hi, Doug.
I wanted to touch base with you on this because, number one, you kind of pegged a recall when you talked about yourself, but also the fact that you were talking about the subject here this morning about churches being such a resource center. Patty and I had a bit of a juggling act. We only had Brian to worry about, but she worked split shift with her employer, and we managed to find a Methodist church in Tilsonburg that had a daycare center that, it was let's just say it was less expensive than most of your daycare centers, And we managed out pretty good between that and babysitter. When I got done work, I was working for a newspaper, so my schedule was kind of weird. But all I can think of on top of that, though, Mike, is that when I think about how often it seems that Doug Ford seems to find a way to throw money at places where he thinks it's going to do the most good in terms of what he gets back, why on earth has he not gone the extra mile for parents? Because obviously, if he works on the daycare end of things, he's going to get a lot of votes in exchange for doing something good for a change.
You know, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And I would submit to you that's exactly why former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced this idea. Again, the devil being in the details of a federal government. That's the way it works here in Canada. Okay, $10 a day childcare. Great. Oh, but did I tell you that I still have to negotiate with every one of the provinces to make sure we've got something that works? And to Doug's point, yeah, maybe Premier Ford could also look at the votes gained by completing this negotiation and getting $10 a day childcare here in Ontario. It ain't here yet. It likely won't be here this year. But Carolyn Ferns from the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare remains cautiously optimistic. An update from the 570 News Center is coming up. Then it's your monthly mental health check-in. Plus, before noon, your daily reminder on this show that not everybody is a jackwagon. Still to come on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We have arrived at the second Tuesday of the month of January. I know, only the second Tuesday, right? January the 13th of the 1,000 days approximately of the month of January. I kid, but I know how you feel, right? On the second Tuesday of every month at this time, and it could not come at a better time this month. We check in with our friends at the Canadian Mental Health Association of Waterloo, Wellington. The CEO there is Helen Fishburn, and she joins us for these conversations every month on the second Tuesday about our mental health. We call it a little mental health check-in. And Helen, I hope the new year finds you well.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
It finds me as well as it can these days. Because honestly, it's tough. We've had a tough start to the year between the weather and really difficult news all across the world. January is a tough month just because it's New Year's resolution time. Our Christmas bills come in, so I'm always struck in January. It's a negativity load.
It really is, and it doesn't help with the events of the day, for sure, world news, et cetera. But I've been feeling it, and I talked about this the first day back from the Christmas break, Helen, about a week ago, and I'm still feeling it because when I was out yesterday walking the dog, I saw somebody with their Christmas tree still in the window, and I really felt it this year when the decorations came down and the house went back to quote-unquote normal. So I'm sure I'm not alone in this. And you talk about the difficulty of the month, even without the world news cycle being what it is. What can we perhaps do in January to intentionally pursue or choose joy in this month?
Yeah, and that's a great word, Mike. It's intentionality for sure. Yeah, I think as always we want people to be aware, right? Because I think at this time of year, it's so easy to isolate ourselves, right? The weather doesn't, encourage us to get out as much, right? It's icy, it's cold. Today's a great example. We could have freezing rain, we could have snow, we could have wet showers. It's gray. We haven't seen the sun in weeks. Like, people just want to hibernate, and then you can go down a bit of a dark hole, right? You can get into news cycles, which are just constantly repeating with really horrible news across the world. You can just see everything out of that negative lens, and that can honestly lead people to feel hopeless and lost at times. You might see an increase in your drinking, or there's just ways that you're not coping in ways that are helpful. So coming back to your question, how can you change that? First of all, you want to be aware. You want to really just pause, take a rest from the negativity, and take a break. Shut the TV off, put your tablet down, find ways that you can create the joy and find the balance, right? Otherwise, it will consume you. So joy is an interesting thing, Mike, and I don't, what brings you joy? It's such an individual thing. What would you do to feel joy in your life?
You know what I've started, and I've intentionally made a point, because I feel all these feels. I really do, Helen. But I make sure I get outside and take a walk with Rosie.
Yeah.
And it's a little thing, but I absolutely. And then I stayed up a little late last night so I could watch my Maple Leafs. Brings me some, even though they lose sometimes, it still brings me joy.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And again, that's what it is, right? You're consciously thinking of that. And I know for sure with joy, it's such an interesting challenge, because it is very different for people. So we always encourage, as always, right, focus on what you can control. Do what you want to do, not what others expect you to do, or, all the shoulds that we do, right? If it doesn't bring you joy to go to the gym, find another way to exercise. Go for a vigorous walk with your dog. Meet a friend. Go outside, because even outside, even though it might be slippery, there's things that you can do. My parents are 90. They go for a walk in the mall in the winter, right, to reduce their risk of falling. There's things that you can do within your control. We always want to encourage people to assume good intent. Don't just automatically jump to negative assumptions about the world, about people, about decisions. Have conversations with people. Connection really matters at a time like this, Mike, because there can be so much, confusion or misunderstanding about things when there is so much negativity. And the other thing is, we don't want you just to, ignore the real world, because we all have to live within it and understand it and find perspective. But you don't have to live there, right? You don't have to live in that negative space. Work on small changes, like you've talked about, going for a walk with your dog, journaling, finding ways to express gratitude to people, sitting in a sunny spot in the corner of your house with a book, making coffee with a friend, making a new recipe and sharing that recipe with someone. I can tell you, Mike, I just called into your show, and whoever answered the phone had the loveliest greeting for me. That was joyful. Simple things like that actually impact people are so easy to do, but they can get lost during times like this.
I really like the point you made earlier about going to the gym, because, and again, this is just me. I want to go to the gym, and I really want to go to the gym. I used to do that decades ago, but on a regular basis, and it's just so much harder for me now. So I intentionally, with that walk that I take, that's my thing now. Right? Maybe that will lead to getting back to the gym. But my point is, and I've just kind of reframed my own expectations. It doesn't have to be a grueling 60-minute workout. It can be fresh air, even when it's not sunny and it's a little bit cold, with the dog. And I enjoy that.
And that's what it's about. You create it for yourself.
Right.
You're choosing it on purpose. And joy isn't just a feeling, it's an action, right? So what are the ways that we're bringing that joy, and we're actually bringing that action to our lives? Going to the gym, sometimes, especially in January, where we see thousands of people flooding back to the gym, right? It's a should. It isn't something that brings you joy. And again, the heart of that is a good intent, because we do need to move our bodies, and we do need to exercise, and we do need to keep ourselves moving. That's good for our mind, it's good for our mood, and it's just good physically, right? So those are all good things, but what are the ways that bring you joy while you're moving your body, right? And those are, each of us can sort that out. You can go onto YouTube and get a really great 20-minute workout and do it in your basement with all the things you have at home. There are so many things. Mindfulness is another great way to bring joy, right? It keeps you centered. It keeps you grounded. as we think about mental health, because it's all about connection, how can you find joy with other people, right? So if you know that someone's struggling, bringing a meal to their house, dropping something at their door, sending a text, sending a funny meme. Like, there's so many ways, right, that we can be thoughtful and mindful of other people and helping to bring them joy and helping them to find that, which, of course, then makes you feel good as well, right? So it's a time for all of us, Mike, I think, to really feel alive, to feel present, and to be really the masters of our own universe in that and deciding what that looks like for each of us.
It's why I'm glad we get to have these conversations every month, Helen, to check in on our mental health, because I'm old enough to remember a time that all we talked about was our physical health, participation when it was in school, the Canada Fitness, whatever stuff. I remember doing that. And that's good, but we've always, historically, I would say, we've prioritized physical health and movement over mental health. And then just here today, we're talking about the connection between the two. And if we're having trouble in January, even that walk through the mall or the walk around the block, whatever it happens to be, incorporating some movement and some fitness can also help our mental well-being.
Like the push-up challenge.
Like I was thinking the same thing. I was going to bring that up, but I knew you were already there. I could sense it.
Oh, and we're so excited to see you registered. Thank you so much. So once again, CMHAs across Canada do the push-up challenge. This seems like the weirdest fundraising event I've ever heard of, but I have to tell you, it works. I mean, who gets excited by push-ups, right? However, first of all, you don't have to do push-ups. You could do squats. You could do something else, whatever your comfort level is. The analogy here is find something that, you feel a little bit of discomfort in and push through it, right? And that's what we do with our mental health. We find those areas where we're feeling anxious, we're feeling worried, there might be some depression, and we're finding ways to push through it. So the push-up challenges starts at the beginning of February. It runs for a couple of weeks. You can sign up for free. There's no cost. And you basically set a goal and challenge yourself, and you ask people to sponsor you. That a portion of those fundraised dollars come back to our local branch where we reinvest back into our community. It's a really fun challenge. People love it. And again, I'm so surprised by this, but people love it. And again, it's a great way to find joy because you can do whatever you need to do, whether it's a push-up or something else. And teams can get involved. People can get involved. It's just a lot of fun. So find something like that. For All Ice Cream in Kitchener, Waterloo, they've got 2 locations, are doing a fundraiser for us. Again, who thought ice cream in January would be fun? But it really is, especially
never a bad time, Helen. Never a bad time for ice cream.
Certainly, you could be the ice cream poster guy, but for sure, it brings joy, right? And we have an amazing local company that's giving some proceeds back to us, again, to reinvest in the community, which is also wonderful.
I think it's great. I'm going to be encouraging our listeners. They're wonderful folks to encourage me with some support financially for CMHA as I incorporate or embark on that push-up challenge in February. 2,000 push-ups. 2,000 push-ups over 23 days, Helen. I'm going to have to be getting up to almost 100 push-ups a day here.
You're going to be ripped, Mike. You're going to be absolutely ripped. But don't forget, you can go for ice cream afterwards.
Don't you worry, Helen. I will. I will reward myself. I love it. Thanks, as always, first of all, for the work that you and the entire team do. And I love these conversations. Already looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, Mike. Take care. And again, thanks so much for supporting us. And we'll see you soon.
Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Helen Fishburne is the CEO of the Canadian Mental Health Association, Waterloo, Wellington. Yes, please put a little pin in that and keep it in mind, because I'll be coming and annoying you a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit, because I know times are tough, but I'm going to do the best that I can. I want to go to the gym. I want to go to the gym. I used to really want to go to the gym. I was at the point where if I missed a workout, my morning workout, it just threw everything off. I was a regular 6:30 in the morning, different time of life, different radio station, different radio shift. I could go on and on, whatever. Can you hear the excuses already? The point is, I now make it clear to myself, because that's where the argument happens, that, hey, you're getting out for walks with the dog every day. I'm hanging on to my 10,000 steps. So far, so good. It's the 13th of the month, and I'm averaging 10,000 a day. This is a big deal. But just the fact, I really do enjoy being outside. I really enjoy being outside, yes, even when the weather is not so great. And so that's the thing that's bringing a little bit of joy and getting me moving, kind of pushing through, because the beginning of the walk is the hardest part. Oh my gosh, I got to bundle up like this to step outside in this rotten weather, right? So I'm going to take that up a step more when February rolls around and I once again compete in the push-up challenge. If you'd like to take part, check it out for yourself, thepushupchallenge.ca, and you too can support mental health in your community. Like I said, I'll be nudging you in the weeks ahead to maybe throw a little bit of support behind this and see what we can get to. Maybe we can get to, like, I don't know, $10 for every Farwell's Force member. So maybe upwards of $3,000, because we have almost 300 members of Farwell's Force, don't you know? But that's for down the road. Thepushupchallenge.ca if you want to check it out for yourself. I've done it in the past, and it's a lot of fun. The little tidbits of information that you get and the encouragement along the way from the site or the app, it's pretty cool. So we'll be doing that. And hey, why not? A local company like For All Ice Cream, 10% of all in-store sales this month supporting CMHA Waterloo Wellington. That's pretty cool. So good on you, For All. And trust me, there's no such thing as a bad day for ice cream, not even January the 13th. So get into For All this month. 10% of in-store sales supporting CMHA Waterloo Wellington. That is our monthly mental health check-in with CEO Helen Fishburne. She joins us on the second Tuesday of every month at 11:30, just so we're being reminded to check in on our mental health as well as our physical health. And something struck me from Helen in that conversation when she said, assume good intentions. It can be so easy to be so reactive these days, can't it? And given the online world in which we exist, even part of the time, misreading or misinterpreting intention or tone can be one of the worst things. So let's assume good intentions. And to that end, why not the reminder that not everybody is a jackwagon? You know how I live my life, right? By the 80-20 rule. We talk a lot about problems on this show, and quite frankly, people who are jackwagons. But really, in reality, 80%, maybe even 85%, I like to think 85% of the people you meet every day are lovely people just like you. They're not jackwagons. And I've got proof coming up right after this quick timeout. Your daily reminder that not everybody is a jackwagon. Coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage outside, or you don't go out Friday night.
Don't talk back.
I just got a really creative request for a specific number of Farwell's Force, and wouldn't you know, the request comes just in time. I will share that story in just a bit, but really, this is your hour, and I like to stay out of the way as much as I possibly can. Phone lines are open from noon until 1 every day so that you have the opportunity to weigh in on the issues of the day, things that we have discussed on the show. Maybe you didn't get a chance to have your say earlier, or maybe there's something that you would like to make the issue of the day because this is an issue that matters to you. And if it matters to you, it absolutely matters to us. So our phone lines are open for the next 60 minutes. Okay, well, 54 minutes and 20 seconds to be exact at 519-570-2545. Star 570 and 1-800-570-5757. 15. Among the issues that we have talked about today, $10 a day childcare. Will it ever be realized here in Ontario? It doesn't sound like it's going to happen this year, 2026, even though the deadline target set was March. It doesn't appear as though the province of Ontario is going to get there in its negotiations with the federal government. Speaking of the province of Ontario, we've also talked about these stockpiles. And I do mean stockpiles. Up near Sudbury, it's estimated that there are some 500,000 used tires in this stockpile. And it's not the only one in the province. There's another up near Ottawa, a massive stockpile of used tires, seemingly because the provincial government made the choice, and we're not really sure why, to reduce the requirement on the part of producers to manage and recycle old tires. Dropped it from 85% to 65%. If you got to recycle less, I guess you'll just stockpile more. But I think we can see the error of our ways in making this change provincially because the stockpiles have already begun. So there was that. Then there was the city of Kitchener. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the show today. I find it really curious that Kitchener, despite the region's water woes right now, we know there is a water supply issue in the Mannheim service area. So that's southwest Kitchener, parts of the townships, Cambridge affected by that as well. But not enough water supply, right? And we've known that for a while. After deferring a conversation around some development applications at its meeting last week, the city of Kitchener last night approved these two housing developments, although added a holding provision to them. So the holding provision means that the local government can allow this development to proceed, but place restrictions on that development until specific conditions are met, and those conditions are set by the municipality. So the city of Kitchener acknowledges that they are concerned about the region's water issues, but, and this is the big but, we also have a housing supply crisis, so we have to ensure, the city of Kitchener says, planning and development decisions are made at the local level and deal with this housing supply crisis. I can't help but think, my take on this was that the city is in some ways poking here at the region because it's the region's water supply issue, and the city is saying, hey, you know, that's your problem. And by the way, by approving these developments, we're going to make sure everybody knows that it's your problem because we have to get housing built. You better fix your water problem. I am reasonably confident that we will fix the water problem, but this just magnifies, again, the implications of where the region went wrong when it came to water. And I just wonder, I mean, is the municipal government at the city of Kitchener throwing a little shade at the regional government here, just reminding us all whose fault this is and how it's holding back development? Because frankly, if we're being honest about this, I get the sense that there's not a whole lot of development happening. And while this is absolutely, I'm not trying to diminish the impact and the concern caused or raised by the water supply issue, but wasn't it Waterloo that's been saying on numerous occasions recently that they've got thousands of units of housing approved, but nobody's putting shovels in the ground right now because the market isn't exactly as conducive to construction as it was a few years ago. Developers want to turn that profit, and if they're not going to be able to do that, they're just going to wait until the economic conditions improve to the point that it's more viable to get those shovels in the ground. So Kitchener can have holding provisions and approved developments all it wants. I don't see a whole lot. Yes, there's some activity out there. I don't think there's as much as there could be. And I'm not sure the water supply issue recently identified is the only factor in that. So I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, the city of Kitchener is throwing a little shade the region's way here. But maybe that's just me looking for a little bit of drama. I don't know anything more about that. Nobody gave me insider information. But when I saw the decision by Kitchener Council last night, that's what popped into my head. I'm like, A week ago, you were deferring. This week, you're approving with conditions. But by approving, you're just reminding us all that the upper level of local government done gummed something up. And then there's no question about the gumming up of the water issue. There's problems there at the region that we have not yet been made privy to. I hope that we do get some answers as to how it got screwed up so bad. And one of the other issues that we talked about on the show today that is always topical, especially this time of year, is Grand River Transit's inability to clear snow from transit stops. This is something, and I told you earlier, a couple of friends of mine over at CTV Kitchener were kind of joking yesterday. And it's not a laughing matter, but if you'll understand it from this side, the media side of the equation, this is a story that we have told again and again and again. And we could take last year's story and not have to change it at all and re-air it this winter. It's the same problem. And we know that a community's priorities are identified by where they choose to invest their dollars. And clearly, it doesn't seem to be too high a priority to get transit stops cleared of snow so that people can access them easier. Think of older people with mobility issues trying to climb that snowbank. And clearly, anybody using a wheelchair or other mobility device is going to have next to zero chance of easily accessing that transit stop, which also makes me think, and I was kind of begging forgiveness of my beloved last night. Not that she complained, because that's not her way, but I came home from my walk with Rosie yesterday afternoon, and it's pretty slippery out there. And I don't know about you, and I would love to get some tips from you in this regard, please. How you have managed this particular winter in terms of your own personal snow clearing. I saw a letter to the editor in the Waterloo Region Record this morning talking about what the plow leaves at the end of the driveway, and is there anything we could do? And I've seen these fancy plows. I think they're even in use in Toronto, whereby the plow kind of has a second blade on it that will clear out the windrow at the end of your driveway as it comes down and clears the street at the same time, which, sure, I think that the plow filling in the end of your driveway is all just part of our winter misery. We have to figure out a way to deal with it. But this particular winter, I have found really difficult. And I'm that guy that's pretty particular about how he maintains his property when it comes to snow. Like, I'm getting down to the pavement all winter long if I can. And I say if I can because of the way this winter has gone. So we got that respite last week, which was much needed, at least at our place, to get all of the other little nooks and crannies cleaned up, because there's just been so much snow and ice, and I can't anyway. I don't know about you, and this is why I'm asking for your tips. I can't get through it all. It's just been really difficult. So some areas that are a little more out of the way, I've just kind of let be. The spring will have to take care of those, but we get the respite. And then I'm coming home from Owen Sound on Saturday, and that's when we got our most recent snow. And by the time I'm walking home from the rink, I can hear the snow crunching under my feet. Not because it's brisk and cold, but it's kind of got that stale bread or stale cake sound or texture to it. And I'm like, well, this is going to be a nightmare to try to scrape up. And so I decided to just leave it the way that it was. And this gets back to me begging the forgiveness of my beloved, because I got home from my walk yesterday afternoon, and it was pretty slippery out there. So I appreciate you, those of you who got out and cleaned up what they could of the snow / ice pellets / freezing rain we got on the weekend. But frankly, the more you tried to scrape up, the icier it is. The crust that I left on top is actually way better for traction. So I said that to my beloved. I'm like, please, I'm not trying to be lazy. I haven't given up on winter. I just left it the way that it is because I think that's the best way to provide traction out there. And who knows, maybe I'm inviting bylaw over to write me some sort of warning. But to me, that's the best way to deal with the ice that's constantly there. Sand, salt, I don't know how you're doing it, but if you've figured it out this winter, I would love to take tips from you about a much better way of cleaning up all of the mess that's been falling down. It's been really frustrating for me this winter. And that's to say nothing of these transit stops that come on with your coming on. Grand River Transit should absolutely be clearing, and clearing in a timely manner. Calls coming from you on Talkback. It's the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every day from noon until 1, we open the phone lines to you so that you get the chance to have your say here on the program. Let's get right to those lines. Mark is with us. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hello, Mike.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. I called yesterday, Mike, about your interview with Mr. Brian Bellows.
Yes, sir.
Was he sporting his Stanley Cup ring when you talked to him?
He was not. I asked him about his rings, and he said the Memorial Cup ring fits just on his pinky finger, and he didn't think it would be right to wear the Stanley Cup ring at a time when he was being recognized for his OHL career. So he just brought the Memorial Cup ring with him.
Okay, he wasn't wearing it, eh?
No, he was not.
I thought you might have given, if he was wearing it, I thought you might have given it a kiss.
Not a chance, because you know what team he won it with.
I know. Just kidding you, Mike. Okay, have a good one.
All right, Mark, thanks for that. You know, after Mark's call yesterday about that interview with Brian Bellows, I was thinking it might be worth replaying that on the show at some point this week in case you missed it during the hockey game last Friday evening. And at the same time, I can remind you that all of our intermission content and the post-game call-in show, Rangers Talk, is posted online as a podcast. So we love the Seeker app, Seekr. It is the place to seek your sounds. And if you just look up Rangers Talk through your podcast app, again, Seeker's a great one. Check that out, and you'll be able to hear not just the Brian Bellows interview and Rangers Talk from last Friday, but all of the other intermission content that we have prepared and presented to you over the season so far, which is more than half done. But you'll find lots of stuff on there if you miss it live when it happens. Go next on Talk back to Preston Paul, Farwell's Force member number 45. Hey, Paul.
Good afternoon, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, thanks. How are you?
All right. How late did you stay up last night to watch the Leafs?
I only stayed up for one period. I wanted to stay up a little bit more. I was pretty excited when they got the lead, and then it was 2-1 Colorado. I'm like, I better go to sleep.
Yeah, I thought you would have ripped me this morning after I said how many times you're going to get smoked last night, but apparently they played pretty good, but I didn't see any of it.
Why not? Did you have to go to bed too early too?
No, I sat and watched the other sport there and watched your Steelers get smoked.
Oh, how did that work out for you?
Oh, well, it was good because I like to see Aaron Rodgers go down, so that was nice to see.
Might have been his last game, Paul. It might have been his last game.
Yeah, but you're talking about the snow and the sidewalk and that. I find that, especially when you get the wetty stuff, if you can put a little bit of salt down before it comes, and when it melts, it really helps get rid of the ice. But if you don't get to it soon enough, you're dealing with a nightmare. And I just like to see these Cambridge snow plowers slow down when they're plowing, so I don't have chunks of ice being thrown up on the sidewalk. We got 6 feet between the road and the grass and the sidewalk. And if they're hitting the sidewalk, they are going too fast down the street.
Yeah, fair point, Paul. Appreciate the call. Thank you.
All right, have a good day, Mike.
Yeah, you too, bud. Good to hear from you today. Look, again, I'm going to say I'm willing to extend as much generosity as I can in this regard, given the kind of winter that it's been. It has just been brutal. I mean, could you just snow already? But instead, you get the ice pellets, you get the freezing rain, and it's made it really difficult out there. It really has. I would not be surprised to learn that slips and falls have increased by orders of magnitude this winter just because of how treacherous it can be. I almost bit it at one point walking Rosie yesterday, managed to keep my balance, but and I really, what am I going to do? Like, how can I blame the person whose property I was walking past? Because I just don't know. Like Paul says, okay, be proactive if you can. It's not a bad idea. I did do that one time earlier this winter. In this particular case, I was in Owen Sound when the snow started, And by the time I got home just after midnight on Saturday, it had already crusted over. I certainly wasn't going to take my shovel out at 12:15 a.m. and start scraping and trying to get it down to the pavement or try to get that crust off at that time. But anyway, I'm just saying, and I know you're still liable and there is lots of responsibility. I'm not trying to, get you out of that responsibility or give you a built-in excuse. I'm just wondering truly what you've done in order to keep up with this nonsense, because it is absolutely that. It's absolute nonsense as far as I'm concerned, insofar as our efforts and ability to keep things clear and safe out there. It's too bad that Paul was so hard on the Leafs yesterday. Just since he brought it up, a quick reminder, a win last night, the only home ice loss that Colorado has suffered so far this season, and the Leafs gave it to them. 10 games in a row without a regulation loss for the Toronto Maple Leafs. 8 regulation wins, 2 overtime losses. I think one was a shootout, actually. 1 overtime loss, 1 shootout loss. Either way, points in 10 straight. The Leafs are in a playoff spot. Look at that. And speaking of Farwell's Force member number 45, which was Paul, I got an email from Brian to Mike at 570news.com, and he asked if he could have Farwell's Force member number 283 because he believes that's the best engine that Chevy ever made. Timing is everything, as they say. And for Brian's request to get Farwell's Force official member number 283, he's just in time because our list sits at 281. So 282 is open, and there are a few others that have asked for numbers much further up. I don't know if we'll ever get to Bonnie's number 2222 or even Greg's 666. We know what you're thinking, Greg, but nonetheless, I said to Brian, I will put you in at number 283, but I will do so reluctantly because Brian wants to remember it by the best engine that Chevy ever made, according to him. I was a Ford guy. My first car, 1969 Ford Mustang, had a 351 in it, a 351 Windsor to be exact, and I said that to Brian. I will reluctantly add you at 283, Mr. Chevy engine, but I was a 351 guy. Although I took that 351 out of my Mustang and dropped a 390 in there. Let me tell you, she was tight, but she went like snot too. Anyway, if you'd like to be a member of Farwell's Force, we are always interested in your participation. We are a force for good, a force for change, and a force to be reckoned with. And all you have to do is listen for 15 minutes. 15 minutes every day, mind you, but still just 15 minutes. You pick the 15. If you want to listen for more, that's great. But we'd be happy to add you to our ever-growing list of Farwell's Force members of Force for Good. Just drop me an email, Mike at 570news.com. We'll put you on the official list. I've got to get you an update from the 570 News Center, and then Ann, hang in there. We'll get to your call right after this update, and there is a line open for you as we continue Talkback on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. One of our Farwell's Force members, number 69 to be exact, which is appropriate because just before that news update, I was talking about my first car, that 1969 Ford Mustang. Dave from Woodstock, appreciate you. He says via email to Mike at 570news.com, I laughed out loud at your comment, went like snot. It did, though, my old 69 Mustang. Dave says, I too am a Ford guy, and in my retirement, I do dealer trades for the dealership in Woodstock. Go Mustangs. It is a pretty cool car, isn't it? Big fan. Always have been, always will be. And maybe one day, I will again own one. We shall see. This is your Talkback Hour, giving you the chance to weigh in on the issues of the day or make an issue, something that's important to you. We would love to hear about it here on the show. Jersey Bill is with us next. Good afternoon, Billy.
Yes, hello. Let me get the speaker there.
Who, what now? Hello. What is happening over there?
No, I was just getting you off speaker. That's
okay,
all.
Very good.
Yes. I in terms of dealing with that ice, I do use some salt. I try to use it sparingly, but I found an ice, essentially a tool I use as an ice scraper, and as soon as, by keeping the snow level pretty low, because I always go out there and get the snow away as soon as it falls. Surely, when you have this higher temperature and it melts, and now you have that slippery, which is, I even slipped on that ice a while back, but luckily I have pretty strong bones, so I didn't break anything. So I realized when you have that layer of ice, that's when it's most dangerous, where you could really have accidents. So I take that ice scraper and I just scrape. It takes a while, but my sidewalk is clear. My neighbors, unfortunately, don't seem to take that much interest in having slippery sidewalks. So it's sort of difficult to do that scraping, but I'm every day I try to scrape more and more on either side, so eventually they will also be clear there. I also found where my rain grate is, and long before you brought it up, I've been making sure that rain grate is free, also to take care of that water flow from the thaw.
Attaboy, Billy. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? I was like this many winters old when I finally figured out the whole catch basin thing.
Yeah, it just seemed to me that made a lot of sense to where there was, but it just helps with the drainage of all the snow.
Sure.
So yeah.
And so you get out there, you do a little bit of scraping every day. So you're giving me a glimpse into retirement, are you?
Oh yeah. That's just keeps me active. I need to get to that gym, as you talked about. I have a gym membership I haven't been using, but that's a resolution I've made, sort of, and I need to do that. But I'm happy that I'm healthy enough to go out there and do some physical labor, even if I haven't exactly toned my body.
Good man. Great hearing from you, Billy. Stay safe out there, okay?
Yeah. Too bad about Pittsburgh, but hey, you predicted it, so there it went.
Thanks, Billy. I take no joy in it, even though it probably sounds like I do. But I was not fazed at all. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers this year got everything that they deserved for the team that they put together and the man that they chose to act as their quarterback this year. Just back on the snow clearing, ice clearing point that Billy was making and the effort that he's putting into it. I mean, we are super lucky at home, super lucky insofar as the front of the house gets fantastic, and I mean fantastic sun. So this ice thing hasn't been a huge problem, except, hello, anybody seen the sun lately? This is a real issue. So, because even in the wintertime, you get that nice sun coming down in the afternoon, and it'll melt away some of the residue that is left behind. So the front walk is usually spotless, but this has just been particularly challenging. And when that thaw came last week, I saw a lot of folks out with ice scrapers cleaning up what had accumulated since the beginning of winter back in November, you'll recall. This is our third month already of winter here, and just with all the freezing rain and ice pellets, it's been a difficult one to keep up with. Phil from Stratford, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sport. My comment about snow removal is here where I live for the last 4 or 5 years, we don't have mail or door-to-door mail delivery. We have a community mailbox at the corner. And it has its advantage because I've met neighbors I would not have met before. But the nice part is in the winter, it is always wet, bare pavement, salted in front of the community mailboxes. So my comprehension is the contractor has like 10 minutes per mailbox to clean it up, and then they take a picture of it. But they set the example.
Yeah, and this whole conversation stems from, we were talking about transit stops. Well, if they can do that on community mailboxes, why can't we do this on transit stops?
Good point.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Good to hear from you as always.
We'll see you someplace.
I look forward to it. I'm sure we will. Phil and I run into each other quite frequently. But isn't that an interesting way to look at it? Yes, I understand. there are more bus stops than there are community mailboxes. But if the community mailbox clearance is setting the standard, why can't we extend that standard to other parts of our community? Betty is with us on Talkback this afternoon. Hello, Betty.
Hi. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Rockin' Ronnie's sister.
You're Rockin' Ronnie's sister?
Yeah, I have met you several times, but you've met so many people. But I just heard it, and I've never called in before, but because I heard about your Mustang, my first car was a 1970 Mustang, and it was canary yellow with the black racing stripe and a standard. And my neighbor owned a trucking company in Petersburg at the time, and he called home to see, because it was snowing really bad, and he called home to see how bad the roads were out there. And his daughter said, well, Betty got home. He said, well, Betty got home. I can get home. Anyways, I just put it in second gear, and away I went.
Atta girl, Betty. Now, do you remember what kind of engine you had in there?
Yeah, it was just a 6, I think, but it was standard.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a Mach 1 or I don't know if they even made them back then.
Yeah, no, I think the Machs came out in 69, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Oh, okay. Is that what you had?
I did not have a Mach 1. No, I just had a 69 coupe.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's cool. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. I don't want to keep you anymore.
All right, Betty. Thanks for calling.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
A canary yellow with black racing stripe, 1970 Ford Mustang. Mine was cherry red, and I did not have a standard back then. I had a shift kit, little 3-speed in there. Oh, man, it's just bringing back so many fond memories. Do you have a fond memory? Here's the thing. How about a fond memory of your first car or a fond memory of the worst car that you ever had? Because isn't that interesting? Let me go back to the Brian Bellows interview that Mark asked about before. In fact, Mark is so interested in that interview, he asked about it twice, yesterday and today. Yes, I did have the chance to interview Brian Bellows, the former Kitchener Ranger, the captain of our first Memorial Cup champion team back in 1982. He was at the game being inaugurated, enshrined into our level of legacy on Friday night. And he used to drive a 1977 Camaro. And he couldn't believe that the car made it around as far or as long as it could. Getting it from St. Catharines to Kitchener was the first challenge, but it was something that he remembers vividly to this day. And then if you asked Brian Bellows, which I did, about his 1977 Camaro, he would talk about the vehicles that so many of his other teammates drove back then, including Al McInnes's car. Yes, that Al McInnes, hardest slap shot in the league, played for our Rangers before going on to the National Hockey League. And I forget the kind of vehicle, but Brian told the story of them being out in Al McInnes's vehicle, and by the time they got to their destination, the vehicle was on fire. And he was having a good laugh about this, because these are the sorts of things that we experience when we're getting a vehicle as inexpensively as we can, right? Maybe something went wrong with it. Maybe you've got a fond memory of the car that was that old beater that gave you everything it could before it caught fire. Or maybe it's a canary yellow Mustang like Betty. Tell you what, we've become quite connected to. We develop relationships with our vehicles, don't we? I think it's Dave who used to call the show I was doing on the country station here at Rogers Kitchener Radio. And I believe, does he call it Black Betty? But he's got a vehicle. To this day, I'm sure Dave has called this show too and talked about Black Betty. It's like the car is a person. They do a lot for us. Sometimes they catch fire. This is Talkback on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. If you were not fired up before, brace yourself, because I just got this email from Scott to Mike at 570news.com. And I know it's Talkback, and it's always better when we can hear your voice and have a conversation. But this one has got my blood beginning to boil a little bit. It is regarding the snow removal model for Grand River Transit. And Scott says via email to Mike at 570news.com, I see a few levels to this issue. First of all, you have the contractor that isn't doing their job. Secondly, you have the fact that GRT seems to think they have 48 hours to clear transit stops, where me and other residents have only 24. So if bylaw shows up at my door to give me a notice, I'll be standing strong on past practice that says you allow Grand River Transit 48 hours, so I get those same rights. And thirdly, something that hasn't been brought forward, there's a manager whose job it is to deal with these stops being cleared. And clearly he's not doing his job because this has been going on for years. So maybe if they get rid of that manager that doesn't seem to be doing his job, they'd have some more money to pay for some cleaning. My dad used to have a construction company that in the winter did snow removal. One of their locations was Cameron Heights High School. They were required, underlined required, to have the parking lot for the teachers perfectly clear by 8 a.m. If they couldn't do that, then the contract would be voided. That was the agreement that he made, and that was the agreement that he had to abide by. So saying that, maybe part of the problem is the contract needs to be more specific, that they have 24 hours to do the job. It comes down to dollars and cents, and this is another sign of the cheapest contractor not doing the best job. Whatever happened to doing the job the very best you can, because it's your job. It reminds me of way back when, when you're younger and you're looking for work and you'll basically do anything to make some money, right? I was that guy. I'd pick up extra jobs just for some extra money. And one of the jobs I had was for a local entrepreneur who had a small restaurant, a sandwich shop, and he hired me to go and deliver coupon booklets to the neighborhoods around the store. And he couldn't believe the response that he got to the coupons. People were bringing them in left, right, and center. He's like, I can't believe this. I'm like, well, I'm glad it's working for you. But what had happened previously, he told me, is he'd hire somebody and they'd take all the coupon books and then they'd either leave them all in the foyer or in the entranceway of one apartment building or dump them down a sewer or some such thing. I'm like, well, why would you do that? You paid me. You offered me money. I think it was $6 an hour back then, whatever. But you offered to pay me to walk around these neighborhoods and deliver the coupon books. Of course I'm going to deliver the coupon books. That's what I was hired to do. Somebody is getting hired to clear the snow. Why aren't they clearing the snow? I don't understand. I cannot understand. John from Waterloo is with us on Talkback. Hello, John.
Hello, Lord Farwell. I hope you are well.
Judge John, I am. Thank you, sir. How are you?
Oh, quite well. Thank you very much.
Good.
Your talk, I tuned in when you were talking about your 69 Mustang, which definitely chased me down memory lane for that E-ride. Anyway, and I would like to remind you that the Mustang, when it started out, was actually a family sedan. And when the iconic movie Bullitt came out, it became the monster we all love.
Very well said, John. Very well said. The monster we all love. I guess now that back in 1964 and a half, right? When the first Mustang, I do remember those advertisements and it kind of appealed to the patriarch of the family, but I do recall a family being there in the showroom looking at that Mustang. I'm glad we turned it into the monster that we love. Another John K. Good afternoon.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Listen, I had a 68 Mustang.
Come on.
Fastback.
Oh, yeah, baby.
And now I have a 2008 Shelby Mustang.
No, you do not.
I do so, and if you want to see it, you can come out to Baden on Wednesday night.
This Wednesday night?
Not this Wednesday night.
You got to wait for the winter, don't you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But Rock and Ronnie used to run that show
I know
in
the
Baden
show.
on Wednesday night.
I know the show very well. Yes, sir.
And on the snow deal, I have a young fellow that parks his car in my driveway, and he shovels my snow.
Well, that kind of seems like a fair trade.
Deal.
It's a very good deal.
And while walking my dog Jacob, I have snow cleats on the bottom of my boots so I don't slip around.
I've wondered about doing that for myself.
Do that, Mikey.
Do it?
Yep. Do it.
All right, I'll do it.
Have a good day.
Thanks, John. You too. Ciao. Great to hear from you today. Taking a walk with your dog Jacob and putting the snow cleats on the bottom of your boots. Listen, we got to do what we got to do. In a perfect world, of course, we wouldn't have to do that. Add additional traction to the bottom of our boots. But this has been some kind of winter. And here's the thing. I'm going to go back, and I deliberately, because I knew we were talking about it today, I deliberately went past and walked yesterday the street near my place. I've told you about this before. The city just went and made they reconfigured, redesigned the whole thing. I really, quite frankly, can't understand why they did what they did. I'm talking about East Avenue here, okay? And I've talked to so many people that are living in the neighborhood, and they wonder the same thing. Like, what is going on here on East Avenue? But anyway, they've added a bike lane or multi-use trail. I don't know. You've got houses and grass to a sidewalk to what we would know as the Boulevard of Grass. And then you've got this, I'll call it a multi-use trail. I think that's what it's supposed to be. And then you've got the street, which has been narrowed considerably. Fine. But what's happened now in the winter is the city will send their little plow down to clear that multi-use trail. And that plow or that machine leaves little snowbanks on either side as it goes down, right? So in some places, if you're the homeowner, at a corner especially, you're getting this little snowbank added to your, I guess it's your responsibility to clear that then? Because the city sure as hell doesn't. So, and that little snowbank gets bigger and bigger as the snow accumulates and we don't get a thaw. And the city does nothing about it. Nothing. So if I'm the homeowner, I'm sure as heck not going to go across my sidewalk, then across to the other side of the multi-use trail and clear a spot to cross the street. That's the city's job now, but they don't do it. And so when I went, and I went by last night and I could see the little, they're smaller piles of snow, I'll grant you, because we've had some warmer weather and some melting. But it occurred to me, every time we are talking about some kind of change like this, I hope that we try to start filtering these things through the lens of what's it going to be like in the wintertime? Because I don't think we thought about that based on what I'm seeing on East Avenue. It's the goofiest thing. It's the absolute goofiest thing. You can tell the machine went down, but then you're leaving these little snowbanks that get higher and higher. And what? Now all of a sudden it's the homeowner's job to clear away the snowbank that you created? I don't think that's the way it should work. Let's filter things through the lens of what would winter do? Anyway, it's all the time I've got to complain about the snow clearing today, but I'm sure we'll find something else to complain about on the show tomorrow. Hey, Tom Korski will be here from Blacklock's Reporter. We're minding Ottawa's business. Rob Deutschman will be here with some political R&D. And is it time to get those iconic, and I do mean iconic, fountains turned back on in Cambridge? My answer is hell yes. We'll talk about it on the show tomorrow. My name is Mike Farwell. You are a force for good. Bye for now.